Prophecy is a central feature of A Song of Ice and Fire. Many of the major plot lines are steeped in it, and so are many of the minor plot lines. But of all the POV characters, there's really no contest when it comes to which character is the most embroiled in prophecy, and that is Daenerys Targaryen. You could argue that Melisandre is more involved since it's basically her entire purpose. It's the only thing that really matters to her, and Dany doesn't actually even really know about the others yet. She's only dimly aware of the Long Night at most. But given that she is the person referred to, the prophecies center around her, a lot of them do. It's pretty hard to argue from someone else. Even Melisandre would probably agree that if she knew Daenerys, that this was the case. Now, lots of people have pieces of the prophecy puzzle, and no one seems to have it all. In this episode, we focus on someone who might have more pieces than anyone else, or at least is well positioned for those pieces of knowledge to matter a lot. And that's Quaithe of the Shadow. Someone who has a lot in common with the just mentioned Melisandre, yet with not more certainty, but more accuracy, right? And by that I mean very simply, Stannis is the wrong guy. Daenerys is the right gal. Yet by the same token, we have a lot more idea of what Melisandre is up to. We've been in her head, we've had a POV chapter, she's appeared quite a lot. Quaithe is a lot more mysterious. How, for example, does she keep speaking to Dany from afar? And why? Is she really just helping with no ulterior motive? Really? Maybe. It's possible, but it's not easy to accept without strong evidence. That's a tough sell. But we might have that evidence here in this episode. We might have sufficient evidence to overcome that difficulty. Quaithe's prophecies are repeated to Dany. She says them multiple times, which is something we've long indicated means a lot. If George tells you something multiple times, you really should pay attention to that. Sometimes he only tells you something once and it still matters, but multiple times, he's really wanting you to focus on that, at least a little bit. And Dany spends a lot of time pondering Quaithe's words. It isn't just when Quaithe is there. It's when a lot of other times happen. She's just like, what does Quaithe mean by that? So she comes up a lot even when she's not there. And this is in A Clash of Kings, A Storm of Swords, and A Dance with Dragons. Even Dany's final chapter in A Dance with Dragons, Quaithe comes up. So even though Dany's story is largely separate from the other arcs in Westeros, she's obviously headed there eventually. Those plot lines will overlap and connect and collide at some point. And Quaithe's role, in part, seems to be preparing her for that by reminding her what she is and by reminding her how the world will perceive her and how much danger she's in from people who might be her friends. And little by little, Quaithe seems to be proving herself. And that's what happens when your prophetic predictions come to pass repeatedly. So we've got Ashai and the Shadowlands, Qarth and the Dothraki Sea, dreams that are not dreams, some of the most famous prophecies in all of A Song of Ice and Fire, a man who warns against prophecies, Marwin the Mage. We've got Sorella, Faceless Pate, Sam, and the delirious dreams of the dying dragon Aemon Targaryen. The glass candles are burning, my friends. All that and more on this episode of History of Westeros podcast. Hello and welcome back, everybody. I'm Aziz. With me, as always, is Ashaya. If you're catching this live on YouTube, it must be 3 o'clock Eastern, because that's when we stream on Sundays. We do most Sundays, and if you can't catch the live stream, you can still catch the video on YouTube after the fact, or watch the edited version, or the audio-only version, both available on Spotify, and audio versions available anywhere you find podcasts, and it's ad-free if you listen on Patreon. This is Topics Moot episode number 13. Patrons voted on 16 episodes at the beginning of the year, February-March timeframe, and we're already at episode 13 of that. So you know what? We were thinking of doing a few more, a mini vote to add to the end of that. Partly that's because the time change or the schedule change related to Night of the Seven Kingdoms. We had budgeted a lot of the end of this year for that, but of course now it's been moved to 2026. So we'll make some adjustments and you will hear about it. A shout out to goodqueenally.tumblr.com. That's Nina Krusling, our great friend, providing us with excellent takes and analysis as usual. The latest post over on her blog is about Doran Martell and the original plan with Viserys and how Arianne would have handled that. Right? Arianne didn't even know about the Viserys plan until way later, until after she'd already made her play with Myrcella. So it's an interesting what-if question that still has relevance because Arianne may still find herself in a position to be queen, just through a different Targaryen than Viserys. If you have questions for us, you can hit us up on any social media platform. We exist on pretty much all of them, but you can also hit us up at our email address, westeroshistory@gmail.com. At the end of this episode, I'll mention some other episodes that relate to this one so you can stay immersed. Keep on that prophecy track or that Daenerys track or whatever it is you want to do. And we'll have a trivia question, the answer of which is at the end as well. The question is, the Citadel has 4 glass candles. What colors are they? Let me now tell you what the section headers are. The different titles that we have, the different sections we're going to talk about today. We have our first appearance of Quaithe, description and background, Qarth, chicken defeats egg, a curious touch, Quaithe's quirky compass, dreams in the belly of Balerion, glass candles, prophecy roster, why so cryptic, delirium on the Dothraki Sea, and the woman behind the mask. Let's also have a poll here for those of you watching live, and we'll reveal the results at the end of the poll or at the end of the episode for those of you who are not catching it live.
I think also if you're on Spotify, you will also see the poll.
That's true. The poll is also available on Spotify
for a year or some months or
a really long time.
Maybe if you're listening to this 5 years from now and you can't vote, but
Yeah. The 3 options are: if Quaithe's mask was removed, option number 1, Dany would know her, and so would we. We would recognize this person. Option 2, Dany wouldn't know who she is, but we would. Us readers would. Option 3, Dany wouldn't know her without her mask, and neither would we. Those are the 3 possibilities there. Well, tell me and Ashea what you think is the most likely. And let's start with Quaithe's first appearance, which, of course, begins with a quote. "Blood of my blood,"
Jogo called,
"I have been to the great city of Qarth and returned with 3 who would look on you with their own eyes."
Dany stared down at the strange... Dany stared down at the strangers. "Here I stand. Look, if that is your pleasure. But first, tell me your names." The pale man with the blue lips replied in guttural Dothraki.
"I am Pate Pri, the great warlock."
The bald man with the jewels in his nose answered in the Valyrian of the Free Cities. "I am Xaro Zoan Daxos of the 13, a merchant prince of Qarth." The woman in the lacquered wooden mask said in the common tongue of the 7 kingdoms,
"I am Quaithe of the Shadow. We come seeking dragons." I would really like to know how Jogo came across these 3 in particular. And of the 3, Quaithe's presence is the most interesting, the most intriguing. The other 2 are connected. They're highly important people in their city. I mean, even though the warlocks have declined in power, in relevance, they're still feared. They're still important to a certain degree, just not as much as before. And they have their eyes everywhere. They're aware of what's going on in the city. Same goes for Xaro, perhaps on an even higher level, because he's so wealthy. He's so connected. He's got eyes and ears probably everywhere. Quaithe, how does she know? She doesn't seem to be highly connected. She doesn't seem to be connected at all, as far as we can tell. There is nothing in Qarth that she is associated with, at least that we know of, right? She's not part of any group, any guild, anything, any organization at all. All we know is that she came from the Shadow. So magic might be how she knew that Dany was coming. It might even be the glass candle that she refers to later. And that might be how she knew. But she may have other powers as well. Obviously, that's something we will discuss in this episode. Quaithe is also by far the most humble here. Xaro is dripping with wealth, and he calls himself a merchant prince, which isn't inaccurate, but it's lofty, it's grand, right? Pate Pri flat out calls himself the Great Warlock, Pate Pri, so like that's obviously not humble. Quaithe just says, I'm Quaithe of the Shadow. And that's it. No pomp, no flair, nothing. She's not even dressed like fancy. She's saying it as if she were Dunk of Fleabottom. It is very casual, even though the implications are eldritch. And also, Quaithe speaks common, as it said in the quote there, to Dany. That's notable. Dany can speak Dothraki and Valyrian. Quaithe probably speaks those too. Well, maybe not Dothraki, but almost certainly Valyrian. So it's interesting that Quaithe is set apart in that regard too. She speaks the tongue that Dany is most likely to, well, feel soft about because it's where she wants to go. She wants to go to the place where they speak that language, where that language is normal. That's where she thinks of as home, even though she's never really been there other than the moment she was born. Note the similarities here to an aspect of the story of Jesus' birth. We talked about this in Valar Regis, how there's a lot of Dany going into the desert. There's a lot of Jesus vibes here. But this is perhaps the peak of that. You've got the three kings, the three magi, right? The three wise men. There's lots of different names for them. Here we have basically the same thing. There's just some inversions, a few things changed around. 2 men and a woman instead of 3 wise men or whatever. That's not much of a change. And 2 of these magi, in this case on the Essos side, are actually practitioners of magic, which, Quaithe and Pate, obviously. Now, magi in this context is heavily debated amongst biblical scholars and just historians too. Were the 3 wise men astronomers or astrologers? It's a huge difference because the latter is forbidden by the text, the Judea's text of the time, right? There was no Christianity back then. So, but it was banned in Israel and the surrounding areas, things like that. We talked about that in our necromancy episode. But the distinction was a lot less meaningful to the average folk, like astrologer, astronomer, because astronomy, the point of astronomy, you're still scanning the heavenly bodies and looking for movement. But the reason you did that in ancient times was to divine meaning from it. So it's similar to astrology in that you're looking at the stars to figure out what's going to happen on Earth. So it's still kind of like a iffy from a scientific perspective, even though astronomy grew into something that was a lot more rigid and scientific. Anyway, this is relevant to Quaithe because she's associated with stars and starlight, and, well, we'll have to go further and you'll see. And of course, it's the birth of the dragons they're interested in this case. In the biblical story, they're interested in the birth of Jesus. Now, Qarth is in the east, relatively speaking, from our perspective of people centered on Westeros, and the 3 kings of the Bible come from the east, also following a comet. Right? Now, according to several Qartheen, Pate Pri among them, Qarth is the center of the world. They see it that way. This is the most important place. It's the oldest place. It's the center of culture and wisdom and all this other stuff. I mean, they're from Qarth, so they're a little biased. But there's some truth to some of what they're saying. It is a really big, important city. Now, Nina adds to this as saying from the iBook edition of A Clash of Kings, which has some pretty interesting notes here and there, that it explicitly references the Magi as a connection of the 3 wise men as the inspiration here, but says that there is a, quote, distinct fairy tale quality to this. Sending off of 3 riders, the reports as one, and then another returns, and then the final rider arriving with 3 travelers on camels. Yeah, so there's a lot of really straightforward connections and some subtle ones too. And of course, George was raised Catholic, so he would be very familiar with the story. And even people who weren't raised Christian know at least the basics of it, so it fits pretty darn well. In the Bible version, of course, Mary is warned that King Herod will kill baby Jesus. And warnings are a huge part of this from Quaithe. Quaithe issues all sorts of warnings. Warnings that people will lust for her dragons, warnings that people will want to use her. This comes later, but it comes from Quaithe herself. So the parallel is very strong. Now, not long after the Magi leave Jesus, after delivering their gifts of gold and frankincense and myrrh, an angel appears to Joseph right after they leave in a dream and commands him to take Jesus to Egypt until he's told that it's safe to return because they're worried about this King Herod murdering thing. Now, this is obviously a parallel as well. Quaithe repeatedly appears in dreams to Dany. Now, later we'll actually get into the semantics of it. They are not dreams that Dany is having, and that's very interesting. But it's obviously close enough for this parallel. Is Quaithe comparable to an angel, though? That's where it's not as clear, because when you hear angel in the Bible, there's no question that it's a being of good. It's not fallen angel, right? It's just angel. So but with Quaithe, it's not nearly so clear. Angels are rarely given names in the Bible. Usually they're just described by their purpose. Like the angels have lots of different jobs, That's fitting as a parallel here too, because Quaithe is so nondescript. We don't know much about her at all. Like she's covered, her body is mostly covered in a robe. She's wearing a mask. She's not tall. She's not short. There's just very little we can go about to dig into what she is or who she is. Nina says she's like the living embodiment of prophecy, just not tangible, not quite tangible, but very much real at the same time. You can't grasp it fully. You don't know exactly what you're dealing with, but you also cannot ignore it. That's Quaithe in a nutshell. I think it's a really good take by Nina, very succinct and gets to the point. But I also have reasons to think we will learn more about her, even if we don't learn a lot more about the origins of some of these prophecies. And it isn't just optimism or hopium on my part. I'll explain later. Now, recall that Dany is given a parade when she arrives at Qarth. The doors open for her. They're like celebrating. It's a big deal. So Jogo did his job well in, spreading the word and getting the red carpet rolled out for her. And why not? You're telling quite a story. A Targaryen emerges from the desert with living dragons? That's hard to believe, but if you're told it's like right over there across, the city gates, go see it for yourself. It's not so hard to believe then when you're witnessing it, right? And then it's no longer unbelievable. You saw it. And a lot of people saw it, right? It was a parade. So you got to believe that when they go home after that, after seeing this parade and seeing the actual dragons and the actual Targaryen, this was not an exaggeration. Well, you're going to tell everybody it's going to be the talk of dinner that night, and then the next day when you're having drinks or whatever at work or whatever you're doing, you're going to all be talking about the mother of dragons arriving in your city. It's by far the biggest news you can imagine. I mean, what bigger news could come? Certainly nothing that would make this irrelevant, right? Everybody's got to want to know. So even though we just said there's very little to describe about Quaithe, let's give it a shot anyway. She's a woman with a red lacquer mask and a long hooded robe. In other words, she's completely covered except her hands, her eyes, maybe her neck, which is relevant because a lot of people from the Shadowlands are tattooed. No hint of tattoos, nothing on her neck or hands, which a lot of Shadow people would have tattoos there. Her skin color isn't mentioned, but she's always portrayed as light-skinned. And as far as we know, that's typical for the Shadowlands, which that tracks. It's a place with much lower levels of sunlight, so you would expect people not to be as dark-skinned. Obviously, it's fantasy. George could do what he wants there, but it tracks, like I said. I guess she's of middling height. There's no mention of her being short or tall. Maybe it's a fairly safe assumption, but yeah. The most descriptive feature is her eyes, which are described as wet and shiny. Usually when George describes wet eyes, he means crying or tearing up. There's a lot of examples of like Sansa or even the Hound's eyes are wet at one point. Lots of different cases like that. But there's only one other case of wet and shiny, and that's Lancel. Lancel in A Dance with Dragons. Or rather, A Feast for Crows. Lancel in A Feast for Crows. Cersei thinks of him as having wet eyes, or shiny and wet, a child's eyes and an old man's face. Now, of course, Cersei is very suspicious of Lancel and is very paranoid that he's, for good reason, so maybe it's not paranoia, but she's worried that he's going to tell about their affair to the High Septon now that he's become all pious. So she's not exactly looking at him without bias here. Like Varys's eyes are described as dark and wet when he comes to Ned in the dungeon. Now he's not crying, but his eyes are described as sort of wet for some reason. Maybe that's just part of his disguise. I'm not really sure. Rattleshirt's eyes are described as shiny behind the giant skull. Oberyn's are dark and shiny. So are Tumco Lowe's, the basilisk knight. Danceos's are shiny, but only when they're like climbing down the cliff. So I don't know that we can read much into this at all. It's an interesting detail, and it's interesting that nobody else seems to have that quite that same description of wet and shiny. So our eyes are a little unique, but not in a way that leads us anywhere. Right? It's like, well,
you know, like I think I agree with you that it seems like most often the connotation is kind of they're teary-eyed or something, but the other part of that to me is passion. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's what I see in some of those is that they're feeling fervent or passionate, and it's like a kind of thing, not the wet part, but the shiny part.
Yeah, I think you're right.
What you would see like when someone's eyes are shining because they have like
they're focused,
fire, this
like
light in them.
In that moment when Dantos is climbing down the cliff, that's really like they're doing it. Like that's their plan is culminating, and he's actually a little bit scared about climbing down that cliff as well. Sansa is Sansa. So yeah, that is interesting too. And Nina says, well, by making her eyes a little bit unique, this could be used later as an identifying feature, or if Quaithe does take her mask off or has her mask off, those eyes might be recognizable without the mask on. I'll be like, hey, that's Quaithe. I recognize those eyes. So given the unique description, that is a way for George to use that unique identifier later as a clue for us, for those of us who are paying attention. And which is super important because George / Quaithe herself is pretty much going all out on the lack of identifying features. It in itself is a feature of her that she has a lack of identifying features. She might be the least describable named character of any significance in the entire series. Like, it's hard to find someone that's less described. Now, another great take from Nina here, I think, is that she's like, Quaithe is like a personification of prophecy itself. That's part of why the lack of description, part of the lack of tangibility fits with her being the personification of prophecy. She's mysterious, unidentifiable, vaguely important, but also pointedly vague, right? She's specifically vague intentionally. You can tell that she's being vague on purpose, though we don't know why. Though we will talk about that. We have a whole section on that, which is the whole why so cryptic section. Again, Quaithe speaking common when she meets Dany is interesting. There's no suggestion of an accent. This kind of detail gets people thinking, theorizing that maybe she's from Westeros. I think you need a lot more evidence than that. Plenty of people speak common. Mary Mazdur speaks common. She learned it from Marwin, you know. Traders go to Ashai all the time, even though it's not a common tourist destination. There's still plenty of people to go there. So it's not something we can really latch onto as a strong piece of evidence. And if Quaithe saw this coming, Quaithe is a person of prophecy, probably. Certainly seems that way. If she knew Dany was coming, or she knew Dany was the person that she needed to be aware of, that she knew that she was the savior, and she saw that, well, if she knows that person is Westerosi, she wants to be able to communicate with this savior who's going to come along eventually. I better be able to talk to her. I need to speak her language. So she may have learned common specifically to one day converse with Azor Ahai, the new Azor Ahai, the new prince that was promised. Now, she says she's Quaithe of the Shadow, Quaithe from the Shadow. Her Dothraki, or Dany's Dothraki, call her Shadow Spawn, all that. The appendix in all the books says that she's from Ashai, which lies by the shadow. It's nearly the same thing, but like, I figured she wasn't actually born in Ashai, but in the Shadowlands, because there's supposedly no children in Ashai, even the locals. So, I don't know, yeah, maybe the locals know better than to raise children in Ashai where it's like toxic. They take them somewhere else where it's less toxic. The Shadowlands are all bad. It's a place steeped in sorcery, just as Quaithe herself is steeped in prophecy, and Dany is steeped in prophecy. So I think she was probably born in the Shadow, not literally in Ashai, but the two are they're so closely related. There's a blurred line there, a shadowed line. Mm-hmm. We don't have a lot of examples of Shadowbinders. The most prominent, of course, is Melisandre. She's going to pop up a lot in this episode. She forms the basis for a lot of our comparisons and assertions about Quaithe. But also Miri Mazdur. Miri Mazdur, clearly a Shadowbinder as well. There's some overlap or possibilities there. That said, Quaithe hasn't really done any Shadowbinding. She's done this prophecy stuff. She may be speaking to Dany from afar. Well, she's definitely speaking to Dany from afar. But that doesn't seem to be a matter of Shadowbinding. It seems to be something else. It seems to be a different form of magic. So we have heard that she's from the Shadow and that she is magical, but we haven't actually really seen it. There's implications of magic that she has done magic ahead of time, but we don't really get specifics, and it seems to be more in the realm of prophecy than it seems to be in strict Shadowbinding. You know, she's not like launching shadow babies or anything like that. Something about Melisandre that makes her unique is that she's a Red Priestess and a Shadowbinder. There isn't anyone else we know that's like that. For sure. Maybe Makoro is, it would make sense, but we don't know for sure. Like Thoros definitely isn't a Shadowbinder, and a lot of these other Red Priests we can assume probably aren't. Unless we're told they are, there's no reason to assume that they know Shadowbinding. You don't assume somebody knows magic, right? That's a big assumption. But she's definitely not a Priestess of R'hllor, Quaithe, on the other hand. So this is just a Shadowbinder, which we only have a couple of. I think Miri Mazdur is literally the only named Shadowbinder, and she's dead. So that doesn't give us a lot of basis. It's a very mysterious discipline of Shadowbinding. All we know is that a lot of people don't like it. It seems pretty dark. It's associated with curses and unscrupulous beings, and yeah, the Dothraki shun it, etc. Melisandre and Quaithe are both focused on the end of the world and stopping it. One is advising the actual princess that was promised. One is advising the person she thinks is the prince that was promised. And returning to the idea of powers, Melisandre, we see her do all sorts of things because she's there. Quaithe is speaking to Dany from afar. How can her magic, other than the magic using to speak to her from afar, be applied? She's going to shadowbind stuff from all the way back in Qarth that's going to affect Dany when she's in, I don't know, Volantis on the Dothraki Sea? Probably not. She's probably limited to talking to her and giving her prophecies or telling her things or egging her on or whatever she's doing. But I think Quaithe's shadowbinding qualities are not going to come up. It's only a way to fill out her background, make her more mysterious, because one of the most mysterious things you can do is make her a shadowbinder. Well, let's talk about Qarth. Now, just as a fun aside and a way to show the lack of link between Qarth and Quaithe is the lack of a U in the Q there. Qarth, you know, George likes to do this. It's something that we David J. Peterson, the language guy, has expressed a mild annoyment at with George with the lack of U after the Q there. But it seems to be like the way it's written, that would indicate that they're not the same culture, which we know that, but it's good to maybe expand on that. Quaithe is not from Qarth, and the big question we have is, why is she even there? What brought her there in the first place? Again, she doesn't seem to have any other associations with anything there, not part of any organizations that we know of. So what's that about? As the three of them, meaning the three Seekers, Xaro, Pyatt, and Quaithe, enter the city with Dany, Quaithe is quiet. Xaro and Pyatt argue with each other and put each other down. They're both like competing for Dany's attention. Meanwhile, Quaithe is just hum-de-dum, walking along, not saying anything. Xaro warns her about warlocks, saying their gifts will turn to ashes. A warning she doesn't actually need because she's already wary of magic because of Miri Mazdur. Which might be why Quaithe doesn't try to do anything overly magical. She's like, well, this is going to make Dany not trust me, and I want her to trust me. Meanwhile, Pyatt's all about all the power and splendor they have, which is a turnoff for Dany. He doesn't realize that, but it is. So Quaithe plays the game properly. They're not competing for her attention. They're not acting like she's an object to win. Quaithe treats her like, well, something entirely different. Something like maybe someone that she needs to advise rather than someone she wants to win over, to get things from. And that's huge. Jorah says the crow calls the raven black, referring to Xaro's gifts, because he's like, that guy, he says, Xaro says Pyatt's gifts will turn to ashes, which they do, by the way. And Jorah's like, well, his gifts will turn to ashes too. which they do, by the way. So not less literally, but they do. In the case of the warlocks, they literally turn to ash. But Xaro's are more like symbolically turn to ash. He withdraws his gifts. He takes his generosity away when he realizes he's not going to get what he wants. And of course, the warlocks swear revenge against Dany, but Euron, being Euron, stole their revenge. He's a very thorough pirate, Euron. He's like, I'm not just going to steal your stuff. I'm going to steal your purpose. I'm going to steal your mission. So, in case y'all don't know what I'm talking about, Euron apparently captured the warlocks as they were pursuing Dany, took all their stuff, brutally abused them, tortured them. Yeah, not good for them, but I don't feel too sorry for them. Now, in Xaro's case, he's constantly trying to overawe Dany. He's just like, oh, look at all my wealth. Look at all my splendor. We could go sailing around doing all these things. You could have all the pleasures of the world, things you didn't even know existed. And she's like, no, I'm not really that interested in that. and Qarth is written like the richest place on the planet. It's written like a place that has been so rich for so long. It's evolved in something unrecognizable in a lot of ways because the powerful people there have been so powerful for so long, they've just lost all sense of... You think powerful people in the real world have lost touch with regular folk? This is that idea on steroids, on times 100. That's Qarth. It's the fantasy version of the city of unchecked avarice for eons. And Xaro is the product of that. And Pyat Pri kind of is as well, though more of the declining phase of that. And of course, what happens? The Undying were trying to steal a dragon, if not multiples, or steal her life force. Xaro Zoan Daxus was trying to steal a dragon too, using a traditional Qarthian wedding practice where you get to ask one favor of your husband or bride to be, and they can't refuse. He was going to ask for a dragon. Jorah figured that out. Dany was like, oh yeah, that must be it. And that's that. Quaithe is nothing like this. She acts more like a Jorah, without the creepiness, than a Pyat or a Xaro. Quote,
last of the three seekers to depart was Quaithe the Shadowbinder. From her, Dany received only a warning.
Beware.
The woman in the red lacquer mask said. Of whom?
Of all. They shall come day and night to see the wonder that has been born again into the world. And when they see, they shall lust. For dragons are fire made flesh, and fire is power. Of course, like I said, Dany has this wariness, like she did with Pyat, because of her experience with Mary Mazdur. So she's like, Quaithe isn't trying to overawe me with magic, but she's still speaking of supernatural things. And she doesn't like not being able to see her face. That's like a negative. That's a bit of a turnoff.
Few people like that.
Yeah, fair, right? Everybody wants to know who they're talking to. It's like, what are you hiding? Now, we know that it's a cultural thing in the Shadowlands, but it's a cultural thing that makes people not trust Shadowlanders. So it's both. It's both things, yeah. Now, Pyat and Xaro want her to stay in Qarth. Pyat wants to win her over. Xaro wants to win her over. But Quaithe wants her to flee, and doesn't want her, warns her to flee. Maybe both, but warns her to flee is what she actually says. And it's because of what these men's intentions are. She's like, worry about those guys. Pyat and Xaro worry about their true intentions. And other people who you haven't even met yet, worry about them too. Pretty much everyone is going to want something from you. All these people who are going to ask things from you, they have ulterior motives. They want your power. They want your power to do things for them, or they want to steal from you, or something. You should always start, whenever you meet anyone, Dany, start by figuring out what those ulterior motives are, because they will have them. If you find someone without an ulterior motive, look harder, because it's probably there. So that is sort of self-fulfilling with Quaithe herself. It's like, well, we'll have to apply that to you as well. What's your ulterior motive, Quaithe? What is your ulterior motive in telling me to beware of other people's ulterior motives? Because if you're going to sit here and tell me that everyone has an ulterior motive, then are you really different? What is yours? So that's the trick with Quaithe, or one of the big tricks with Quaithe. Maybe that's the question of Quaithe, the most important question of Quaithe here. Your mileage may vary, but it's certainly a contender. Now, there's more conversations off page, as this next part indicates. Quote,
When Quaithe too was gone, Ser Jorah said,
"She speaks truly, my queen, though I like her no more than the others."
I do not understand her. Pyatt and Xaro had showered Dany with promises from the moment they first glimpsed her dragons, declaring themselves her loyal servants in all things. But from Quaithe, she had gotten only the rare cryptic word.
Quaithe isn't exactly being specific, or maybe saying anything that isn't kind of well known. Yeah, almost everybody wants something from Dany. I think Dany kind of figures that on her own. She doesn't necessarily need Quaithe to know that, but maybe she needs to make that more important. Maybe this is a factor in her life or in her quest that she needs to elevate, because it's going to happen a lot. People are going to really try to get things from her, or try to kill her, or both. So it's basically a warning about everyone. And I think this is a big fail on Jorah's part. He's right to agree with her in saying, yeah, she's right to not trust those other two. But I don't like her either. But the other two just had way more red flags. There are all these offers and promises to serve, and I'm so loyal to you. The second you meet, come on. This is obviously blowing smoke. But Quaithe doesn't do that. So I think Jorah should have, and it's Jorah's job to be suspicious, right? He's their bodyguard. It's fine that he's doing that. But I think it's a misread, because the other two, they're shamelessly doing all these things that are very red flaggish, where Quaithe's, maybe they're red flags, but they're not aimed at Dany, right? They're not obvious. The fact that she isn't trying to get anything from Dany, hasn't made any requests, hasn't asked anything, hasn't even hinted at wanting something. That should put her on another level, a less threatening level. But maybe from Jorah's perspective, it's just, well, the fact that she's more mysterious is potentially worse. Yes, these men shamelessly are wanting things from you. They're saying all these things that aren't true. But in some ways, that makes them easier to predict. This is the enemy you know. Lots of people are going to act like that. I can deal with that. Quaithe, what the hell is she? We don't even know who she is. Yeah, she's not asking for anything, but maybe she's just biding her time. We don't know that. So I don't think Jorah's suspicion is too misplaced. I ultimately do think he's wrong, but that's because I have more information than Jorah does. I have the benefit of hindsight. Though not entirely when it comes to Quaithe, because what we see in Quaithe so far does align with, she's trying to stop the end of the world. She's trying to maybe not help Dany, but help Dany achieve that. She doesn't necessarily care about Dany as a person. She doesn't care about what happens to Dany as long as the world is saved. That's an important point that we should keep in mind all the way throughout this, because just because Quaithe wants to save the world doesn't mean she cares a fig for Daenerys Targaryen as a person. So that is a disconnect. That is a reason to be wary of somebody. So, yeah, she wants me to help save the world, but she doesn't care about me. Now, that's understandable too. What is the life of one person against the entire freaking world? So you can kind of get why Quaithe is like, well, I don't have room to also save you. I got to save the whole world, and you might have to die to make that happen. Quaithe wouldn't want to tell her that if that's the case. So that's an important factor too. So I don't think we'll ever hear again from Xaro. Xaro's done. He's out of the story. I doubt maybe Dany thinks of him as an example of the greed of men. But Pyatt, and he's definitely, as we described, he's out of the story. I don't think he's getting out of the silence's hold. He's not dead, or maybe he is. And it's not clear which warlocks had fed on the others, because he made them eat themselves. Terrible, yeah. Whether they're gonna survive or not, which is almost certainly no, they won't be a problem for Dany anymore. Their revenge plot will be, because Euron has absconded with it. And he's more dangerous anyway. But Euron's not really much of a part of this. Interestingly, he isn't something that Quaithe warns her about too. So that's something else important to keep in mind. So just because Quaithe is saying some of these good things, it doesn't mean it's good for Dany. That's the closest thing I can get to so far in terms of an ulterior motive, a separation between what's good for Dany and what's good for the world. Now, Dany is going to ponder whether Quaithe is an enemy or a dangerous friend. I think that's it. That's it in a nutshell, a dangerous friend. She's dangerous because Dany's life is not terribly important in the scheme of things, given what is hanging in the balance. There's the danger. But the friend in that she is trying to help Dany with something that Dany wants to do. Now, why was Quaithe in Qarth? We started this section with that, and now we can come back to it. She's not Qarthine, as we said before. No profession or association with others in the city. She's just there. Which is yet another example of how different she is from the other two Seekers. So it's probably because of prophecy, right? Quaithe went to Qarth knowing Azor Ahai would be there or would show up there. And she went there to encourage Azor Ahai, Dany, to go east more. Maybe with her. Quaithe, if Dany had gone to east, Quaithe might have gone along. They might have traveled together. We should consider this from a meta level. As we detailed in our Shadow by Ashai episode, George at some point changed his mind about Dany going to Ashai. In book 1, he seemed to be set on that. But in A Clash of Kings, he'd already changed his mind. It wasn't after that. It was during. The book indicates that. Like, she's already changed her mind. She doesn't go to Ashai, and there's no way she's going to. She gets the word from the Cinnamon Wind. She gets those ships. She starts going west. She's not going east, and I don't think she's going to go back. She is going to go back, but not to that back. She's not going to go to Ashai. So George had already made that decision. So that's particularly interesting that instead of going to Ashai, she's going to learn the things that she would have learned in Ashai from people who have been to Ashai. They are like the portable Ashai. Miri Mazdur would have been, she's dead, but she did a little bit. Marwin has been there. He might matter. He's headed to Dany, right? At the end of A Feast for Crows. That's what he says he's doing. And Quaithe herself, of course, fits into this very well. So people who have been to Ashai can fill in those blanks for Dany. Instead of going there, she can learn what she needed to learn from them. And Melisandre, too. Of course, Melisandre, and then it would have to be in the long term. That's something we talked about in her episode, our Melisandre episode, is that once Melisandre figures out that it's not Stannis, assuming that she ever does before losing her life or something like that, she would switch to Dany and maybe tell her things. Melisandre might know things about dragon lore or just other things about the prophecy. Just as the person who's been to Ashai, she's Melisandre of Ashai. She could know some important things that haven't come up yet. Also, how long she been there? Quaithe, like, that's the thing about prophecies, right? You don't have a timestamp. You can see through scrying or fire reading or whatever. You can see what's going to happen. You can see what is happening, but you don't know exactly when. It's like, is this an hour from now? Is this happening right now? Or is this like a few days from now? Or did this happen a few weeks ago? They don't yet. No timestamp. It's the event can be seen, but there's no placing it chronologically beyond certain reasonable barriers there. So that's curious. So maybe Quaithe had been waiting for a while. She's like, well, according to magical means, I know Azor Ahai, the princess that was promised, is going to show up in Qarth. I don't know her name. Or their name. Doesn't even know the gender necessarily. Maybe she does because of the mother of dragons. Maybe that's part of some vision that she had. But we can't assume specifics. All we know is that Quaithe had a reason to go to Qarth. It's probably this reason. And it may be something that she's known for a while and has been waiting for a while. But it could also just be a short time. We know that she's been at least there for half a year. But that's it, which is not a whole lot to work with. So maybe it's been 5 years, but at least a half a year. Chicken defeats egg. It's a question in the fandom whether the dragons spurred the return of magic or the other way around. Quaithe weighs in on this directly. After they all witness some street fire magic, Quaithe points out that it's not a trick. Jogo calls it a trick and Quaithe corrects him. Dany's a bit surprised to see her. She's like, Quaithe, where'd you come from? Because they were just walking around the city and then Quaithe appears in the crowd. And like, oh, hello. Qarth is huge, so this is probably almost certainly not an accident. Quaithe was following her, or using the same sort of magic. Quaithe knew Dany would show up in the square that day. Like, well, I'll wait here and she'll show up. So you can't rule out magical means. I mean, if she knew Dany would show up in Qarth eventually, then maybe she could know she would show up in this particular plaza, It's similar enough that you can't rule it out. Dany is curious what Quaithe is talking about. She's like, what do you mean? And here's what she says. Half a year gone, that man could scarcely wake fire from dragonglass. He had some small skill with powders and wildfire, sufficient to entrance a crowd while his cut purses did their work. He could walk across hot coals and make burning roses bloom in the air, but he could no more aspire to climb the fiery ladder than a common fisherman could hope to catch a kraken in his nets.
Dany looked uneasily at where the ladder had stood. Even the smoke was gone now, and the crowd was breaking up, each man going about his business. In a moment, more than a few would find their purses flat and empty. And now?
And now his powers grow, Khaleesi, and you are the cause of it.
Me? She laughed. How could that be?
Quaithe responds simply, because you're the mother of dragons. And this is a curious moment because it's less cryptic, it's more indirect. It's just straight up, because you're the mother of dragons, But I've always been on the side that the dragons are one of the things that returned when magic came back. Not that the dragons caused the other magical things to happen or return. But that is absolutely what Quaithe is saying. She is totally saying that the dragons brought it back. Now, she knows better than me. She knows better than all of us, probably. Assuming she's telling the truth, which she probably is. Old Nan, of all people, agrees. She claims that she could smell the red comet and says it represents dragons. Osha similarly says it's blood and fire, which, of course, to us is a draconic reference. And Melisandre straight up calls it dragon's breath. So, yeah. These are all lesser users of sorcery, and Old Nan's not a user of sorcery, just a fount of knowledge about the supernatural. And they're all saying similar things. They're all kind of talking dragons or things like dragons or the product of dragons like dragon breath. It's fun to think about this as an aside. This fire magician who's making way more money now because of the return of magic. And there was probably like happening all over the world. Like all sorts of magicians and street performers are like, whoa, we got raises. Now, one of the reasons I don't really get on board with the idea that the dragons brought magic to the world is that the others came back before the dragons were born, for example. Like, they obviously appear in the prologue, and the dragons don't happen until the end of the book. That's like months, if not a year. The comet even appeared before the dragons were born, just barely. Like, it appeared like minutes or hours before, but still before. Now, of course, they see that as the heralding. They're like, yeah, this is the comet's coming because of all this, because the dragons are about to be born. But she doesn't say, but wait a second. She didn't say magic is more potent because dragons were born. She said magic is more potent because you are the mother of dragons. She didn't say it's because they were born. She goes, you are the mother of dragons. That's not quite the same thing, is it? If Quaithe sees Dany as Azor Ahai, and I think she does, and Benero, the high priest of the Red Temple of Volantis, the biggest one, also says so, then what she might be saying, instead of the birth of the dragons brought magic to the world, is no, you are the omen, not the dragons. The mother of dragons is the one that matters. That's the spike. That's the milestone. That's the big thing here. Not the dragons that you brought, but you. You're the one that matters here. You're the unique happening. You're the symbol of end times, of times of destruction and then renewal. She's that. Her dragons are the tool for that, but without Dany, none of that happens. That's an interesting way to look at it, and in a lot of ways, it fits better. Because again, this conundrum with magic, the dragons, this doesn't seem to fit, even though Quaithe and Old Nan and these other characters seem to be pretty trustworthy. They know what they're talking about. But they can easily be wrong. I mean, this is deep stuff here. By the way, the idea that this is destruction and renewal is what we're headed for, it's super fitting for a dragon to be that personification. And you need a brain, you need a human to guide. The dragons aren't just going to scorch Earth, Westeros on their own, just for the hell of it. You need a leader. The mother of dragons has to guide them towards that. The renewal part is what comes after, right? You destroy, and then on the ashes, a new world comes, right? The dragons aren't part of that part. Dragons don't grow trees, right? Dragons don't plant trees. Same difference. Well, you know, if we're really getting into the weeds, I bet dragon fertilizer is pretty good stuff, pretty strong stuff. Anyway, but that aside, what in this planet, what in Planetos can destroy like a dragon? The Doom? Nothing that humans can control, and very few humans can even control dragons. And why are we talking about destruction and renewal? Because Westeros is very stuck in its system. It has existed in this very similar state of affairs without technological advancement, without cultural advancement for a long time. And that might be why they need a little kick in the butt. You know, get out of that cycle, break that wheel, burn that wheel. And of course, there's the others that are coming to potentially reset a lot of things. That would be destruction and renewal. And that may have been what the Children of the Forest had in mind in the first place. Freeze everybody else out, then renew with just them. So a little fire and ice combo there. A curious touch. Here's a moment with Quaithe and Dany that very much bears extra attention. Sorcery may be afoot. Actually, sorcery may be a hand. Quote.
The woman stepped closer and lay 2 fingers on Dany's wrist.
You are the mother of dragons, are you not? She is, and no spawn of shadows may touch her.
Jogo brushed Quaithe's fingers away with the handle of his whip. The woman took a step backward.
You must leave this city soon, Daenerys Targaryen, or you will never be permitted to leave it at all.
Dany's wrist still tingled where Quaithe had touched her. Where would you have me go? She asked.
There's zero chance this tingling means nothing, right? It has to matter. It has to be an evidence of something. Some sort of magic happened there.
Their romance.
It's a romance. Danny's like, ooh, your touch thrills me.
Every time we touch, I get this feeling.
So, my favorite guess, and really the only guess I have, is that it has to do with Quaithe appearing in her dreams later. Like she radio tagged her, geotagged her, and is like, now I can find you like a bug. Now I can track you, your location, anywhere I want. I can, without that physical contact, she wouldn't be able to enter Dany's dreams later. It's never referenced again, this tingling wrist. Dany's wrist doesn't tingle later. But it's not nothing, right? We don't have any even comparable magic, though, to base it on. I can't think of anything in the books that's similar to that, like a geotag, for lack of a better word. Like, I will always be able to find you now. I have a tracking device on you. But it's also a tracking device with a speaker and a projector, right? Because of video projector. Because Quaithe appears in her dreams. Again, it's not quite dreaming, but waking dreams type situation. And the warning is fairly straightforward, too, and probably accurate, right? Yeah. These powerful people are going to first try to coax her. Zara's trying to win her over. Pyatt's trying to win her over. But if that doesn't work, they will use other means. They'd rather win you over, but they will take you. They will use violence as the next resort. It's not even a last resort. It's the next resort. It's like, well, option 1, coax. Option 2, take. There isn't really a third, that's it. They start with 1, move on to 2 if that doesn't work. And it's very straightforward. It's human nature. This is, again, not some deep insight that Quaithe is laying on Dany. Jorah's saying the same things. It's good that someone besides Jorah is saying them so that Dany gets multiple opinions on that. That's useful. And Dany's also young, so maybe some of these life lessons that are kind of obvious need to be restated, need to be made clear to Dany that, this is really important, not just kind of important. So there are those who theorize that Quaithe was actually sending visions to Dany before Quaithe's first appearance. All that mother dragons talk inside her head in Game of Thrones when she's having fever dreams, the visions of her ancestors with gemstone eyes, all that, mother dragons, you go, move, do all this stuff, like the things that were pushing her to, do what she did that ended up in hatching the eggs. Some people would guess that was Quaithe all the way back then. I'm not really on that train because I think the wrist touching is what enabled Quaithe to start doing that, and it hadn't happened yet. But I don't have a huge amount of confidence in that. But I would also think there'd be some clue to connect Quaithe to those visions if she was behind them. And there's nothing really, 2 seconds of a red lacquer mask appearing. That would be too obvious. But there's just nothing, And when Quaithe appears in these visions later, it's Quaithe. It's not someone else that she realizes is Quaithe. It's just her. She just projects herself. So none of these other examples that might be Quaithe have Quaithe in them. And the ones that we know are Quaithe, she's always in it. So that doesn't necessarily align. So I kind of think that I would guess no on that theory that Quaithe was sending dreams to Dany before they even encountered each other in Qarth. Can't eliminate it, though. Definitely can't eliminate it. Quaithe's quirky compass. Probably the most famous thing Quaithe says is this thing we're about to read, and she repeats it a few times. Y'all will recognize it. It's the first one. The first time she says it, it's a bit more than halfway through A Clash of Kings. Quote, "To go north, you must journey south. To reach the west, you must go east. To go forward, you must go back. And to touch the light, you must pass beneath the shadow."
Ashai, Dany thought. She would have me go to Ashai. "Will the Ashai give me an army?" she demanded. "Will there be gold for me in Ashai? Will there be ships? What is there in Ashai that I will not find in Qarth?"
"Truth,"
said the woman in the mask, and bowing, she faded back into the crowd.
Dany was like channeling the tickler there. Will there be gold in Ashai? Will there be ships?
You're right.
So what truth might that be? Quaithe says truth, but what? What truth? Something about Dany's ancestry, her purpose, something uncomfortable that Quaithe doesn't want to tell her straight up because it'll turn her off from listening anymore. It's like, well, I'm going to tell you that you're the mother of dragons. You know that. I'm going to tell you that you're Azor Ahai. You're the prophesied savior of the world. Do you believe me? That's just a rough thing to just drop on somebody. Maybe you got to bring her along slowly, or maybe you have to point her in the right direction so she learns it for herself. If she learns it for herself, she's a lot more likely to believe it and take it to heart than if just some random stranger in a red lacquer mask is telling her. And this also speaks to something we'll get into a little deeper later in the episode about why Quaithe is so darn cryptic. That's part of why, maybe, is to get Dany to think rather than just to tell her things. And the more Dany thinks, the more it will resonate within her, the more she'll, like I said, take it to heart. And again, she doesn't say prophecy, she says truth. She also doesn't say answers. She says truth, which is not the same thing, right? Because these truths might refer to questions Dany isn't asking, questions she doesn't know to ask. She hasn't learned that yet. And she's not going to Ashai. Whatever is being said here, it's not going to happen. And George already knew that when he wrote it. Be very clear on that. He didn't make that decision after this. He made it before. He still wrote it as people like Quaithe and even Jorah are trying to get her to go there, but she decides not to. So these truths, again, will have to be learned elsewhere since she's not going to Ashai, and that speaks to my earlier point about, well, Ashai can come to her through people who have been there and have that knowledge, that truth, whatever that truth is. That might make it harder to accept. Again, because if it's coming from Melisandre or Quaithe or Moqorro or Marwin or all of them, well, it would help if it's all of them. If they all are telling her something, she's more likely to believe it. But if it's something she learns from like an old book or something like that, that's certainty that it's not an ulterior motive if she just reads it in a text. Like, well, this old book isn't trying to screw me over. It's not trying to steal from me. It doesn't want something from me. It's a book. It's a scroll. So that taking out the human element might have been what George was originally thinking about. Like, well, if Dany just reads this in a scroll, then, that's a lot more believable. How does this relate, though, to Dany's fight against the Long Night eventually? On the surface, it's easy to see a connection in that, well, Asshai is where the ancient legends about Azor Ahai and the last Long Night are kept. That's the one place on Planetos, or maybe the most likely place on Planetos, where there would be records of it, or written even. Certainly there don't seem to be in Westeros. Maybe in the Citadel is a little bit, but Asshai is the place where you would think the majority, the best sources would be. So that you can just kind of see just from a very high level. It's like, well, that would be a reason for Dany to go there to learn about those things. But take that back and say, well, she could learn those things from individuals who have learned that. That can be passed on to her. She doesn't have to go learn it directly. But it also would help learn what they're facing. If you know what happened in the last Long Night, if you read about it and get lots of detail, that really helps you understand what you're going to face this time. It really helps you understand what the consequences would be if you aren't successful. And that can be very motivating. And to repeat, Dany doesn't even really know about that yet. It's just a long night to her. It's just like it's not something imminent. She hardly knows about it. And that's really important. Keep in mind, when Dany ponders the cryptic meanings behind these things, she can't consider that. She can't consider the long night or the others. That's not something that she will land on as a solution or as an answer. She's not aware of it yet. So that might be part of the truth that she still needs to learn. And you can't just tell someone all that. It's like, so, Dany, 8,000 years ago, there were these icy beings that emerged. We don't know exactly where they came from. We'll talk about that later, but they might be coming back. And how do you just tell her all that? Dany doesn't have a basis. It's too much to tell all at once. You have to bring that along slowly. You have to spoon feed this information. She has to learn a little bit about it, learn to accept that, get a little more. Because what she may have to eventually accept is that she has to face that. She has to set aside the thing that she's entirely focused on. Her entire arc has been focused on reclaiming the crown, reclaiming the throne. Eventually, she's got to divert from that plan to go north, right? During, after, before, we're not exactly sure how the timing will work out, but something's going to send her north, and this is set up for that, right? Before she even knows that problem exists, Quaithe is leading her towards it. For lack of a better term, this is kind of Quaithe's style. A lot of prophet-type characters describe images and interpret them. And Quaithe does that in one point, at least, with Kraken and Dark Flame, Lion and Griffin, Sun, all that stuff. Those are symbolic interpretations of people. But mostly Quaithe gives directions. She's not telling her of images and imagery or things that she dreamt of. She's saying, you got to do this, you got to do that, you got to be a dragon, you got to go east, go west. That's cryptic, but it's not painting a picture. It's telling her, what to do. It's kind of like a map. She's painting a map. It's a weird map, like I said, with a strange compass where north is south and east is west. It's like an M.C. Escher map, really. It just doesn't make sense. The Cthulhu map where you look at it twice and it's different the second time. Every time it's different because your mind can't process it. So I think that's a big part. Is Quaithe is bringing her along slowly because you can't just fire hose all this cryptic end of the world apocalypse information. It's too much to tell somebody all in just a minute or two or one session. You got to bring them along slowly. Dany has to learn. It's a curriculum, end of the world curriculum. You can't do it all in one class. You can't do it in one session. The Crone's Eye says, Lovecraft creeping in via Quaithe's name. It's an anagram for Ithaq. Ithaq. I don't know how to say that. Ithaque. An alternate spelling of Ithaqua, the Windwalker, one of the great old ones in the Cthulhu mythos. Probably an Easter egg. Huh. That definitely went over my head, and it's a very good chance you're right about that. It could be, anyway. That's cool. Yeah, and we obviously know already that George is big on Lovecraft references because it was a big influence on him growing up. Especially the farther east you go, the more Lovecraft stuff there is. And, well, Quaithe is from the Far East, so could indeed be an Easter egg. I like that. This is a good example of a very spread out topic, and something that I think is one of the things that I think we bring to the table when we're making episodes. Is it's pretty hard to keep track of Quaithe. She's important, but not important enough or prominent enough that you don't forget about her temporarily. Then she's like, oh yeah, Quaithe. She comes back, you're reading a Dany chapter, and there she is again. But her stuff is so spread out among so many different books, unless you hone in on it like we're doing now, it's really hard to glean much from it, because it can easily just kind of mix into the whole amalgam of prophecy and stuff that isn't quite ascertained by Dany yet, stuff that maybe she will eventually understand but doesn't yet. It all just kind of mixes into that, and only getting into the weeds like we're doing now is when you really start to see that it's really well defined in some ways, and Quaithe is very unique in a lot of other ways, and that's great. We love that. It's yet another example of reading between the lines, digging deep, and being rewarded. We've covered A Clash of Kings, we've covered Quaithe's debut, and we've covered Qarth. Let's go to A Storm of Swords and Dreams in the Belly of Balerion. The early portion of A Storm of Swords sees Dany aboard Illyrio's ships, right? Qarth is where those ships arrive. She gets on them, renames them after Aegon's dragons, Aegon and his sister's dragons, and she has a lot of time to think and dream. Quote,
"That night she dreamt that she was Rhaegar, riding to the Trident, but she was mounted on a dragon, not a horse. When she saw the usurper's rebel host across the river, they were armored all in ice, but she bathed them in dragon fire, and they melted away like dew, and turned the Trident into a torrent. Some small part of her knew that she was dreaming, but another part exulted. This is how it was meant to be. The other was a nightmare, and I have only now awakened."
She's absolutely being a dragon in this dream, right? She is literally a dragon. She is bathing them in dragon fire from her own dream mouth. How would the Trident gone if they had a dragon there? It may not have even happened in the first place. But if she did, or if they did, it would have been the end of it. The Robert and his buddies would have been toasted, or in this case, melted away, as the dream is showing, destroying her enemies. And this is where it kind of overlaps. Dany does have to face these enemies. She has to face political enemies in Westeros, and that's what she's expecting to face. But in this dream, she's melting her enemies, which kind of foreshadows who the real enemy is. The ones who would melt, which humans wouldn't, but the ultimate enemy, the others, they would melt to her dragon fire. And that is really interesting as well because of the way this is framed. She, at the end, given that sentence there, the last line, she's feeling like the dream is reality and reality is a dream that she's awoken from. That's creepy and very intriguing because at the same time, as it says, she also knows she's dreaming. A part of her knows she's dreaming, but it seems like the other factors are more prominent. The fact that she's exalting and feeling strong and feeling like that's the real world. This is important. In Quaithe's, again, in quotes, dream appearances, Dany is never fully asleep, but she's also never fully awake. It's like to get into Dany's dream, to make Dany have these visions, she has to be in a certain state of mind. She can't just do it at any time of day, any point she wants. It has to be when Dany is like half asleep or feverish or delirious or drowsy. That seems to be a pattern here. As you'll see, as we go through these examples, you'll notice that that's always a thing that's prominent in these scenes. So after she says the other was a nightmare and I have only now awakened, she actually does awaken here. Quote,
"She woke suddenly in the darkness of her cabin, still flush with triumph. Balerion seemed to wake with her, and she heard the faint creak of wood, water lapping against the hull, a footfall on the deck above her head, and something else. Someone was in the cabin with her. Eerie? Jiki? Where are you? Her handmaids did not respond. It was too black to see, but she could hear them breathing. Jorah? Is that you?
They sleep,
A woman said.
They all sleep.
The voice was very close.
Even dragons must sleep. I gotta admit, that line kind of throws me. Even dragons must sleep. I mean, her dragons are asleep in the scene. They're sleeping in the bedroom with her. But this seems like that's a very ordinary thing to say. Like, yeah, dragons need to sleep. Everything needs to sleep. So, yeah, I'm a little puzzled by that one. I would love to hear interpretations from y'all on this one, because I really have nothing on that. It's also interesting that she senses Quaithe with sound. Like, she's projecting herself there. She's not actually there, but Dany can see her. But she heard her before she spoke. Like, Dany sensed her somehow, and I think it's an audio thing, because she's describing how she heard a faint creak of wood, water lapping against the hull, a footfall, and something else. Someone was in the cabin with her. So is Quaithe's projection, does her footsteps? Or is it just she making a sound? Does she, like, breathe heavily or something like that? So that's interesting. I wonder what that's all about, like a sensory thing that is too fleeting or unspecific for us to put our finger on, or Dany too. So later Quaithe will say that only Dany can see her. Dany's like, well, are you here? You know, blah, blah, blah. And she's gonna be like, nope. And so Dany's like trying to figure out what the hell's going on. And Quaithe will also tell her that these aren't dreams. So it's sort of like Quaithe is priming her. She's like, yeah, like, stop freaking out about the fact that I'm here. Stop trying to figure out what this means. Like, yeah, I know this is weird that I just appeared to you, but it's not a dream. And don't worry about that. Listen to what I'm saying and don't worry about why I'm here. That's hard to do, though. Like, how did you get in here? How, if this is a dream, how is this possible? You know, like, none of this makes sense. It's hard for Dany to listen to what Quaithe is saying when none of what's happening should be possible without supernatural means. And if supernatural means are occurring, well, that you got to put your guard up there. You're like, wait, what kind of spell is going on here? It gives Quaithe a little more gravitas, though. It's like, okay, you really should pay attention to what I'm saying. There's another aspect of my powers that you didn't know existed until I appeared to you in a waking dream type scenario. If this doesn't overawe you a little bit, well, I've got more work to do. But it's part of, like, you really should listen to me. I'm powerful. It's very similar to why Stannis gives weight to Melisandre. He's not like, I don't believe in the Red God. I'm not religious, but she undeniably has power. She can do things that regular folk can't. Quaithe is kind of demonstrating a little of that for Dany. She's not, like, you know, doing tricks like the fire, the flame things, or using deception in the way Melisandre does, but it's still proving herself, right? So did Quaithe send that dream about Rhaegar, the one that kicked this off, that had her dreaming about being a dragon? Two reasons I suspect that is two reasons I suspect that. One, which is that Dany has exactly one dream about Rhaegar. This one, that's it. She doesn't have any other dreams about Rhaegar. The only other vision she has of Rhaegar is that Song of Ice and Fire vision, right? Where Rhaegar is naming his kid and he's talking to Elia. That's a vision in the House of the Undying. That's not a dream she had or a vision she had elsewhere. And because it's in the House of the Undying, we can be pretty confident that that one wasn't sent by Quaithe. But this one might be, because it's not only is it right before Quaithe appears, like Dany has this dream, then Quaithe appears, like interrupting the dream or right when it gets to its climax. But in the dream, she's a dragon. And that's what Quaithe keeps telling her to be. That's a recurring piece of advice or imploring thing that Quaithe says is, you got to be a dragon. So see, since she is that in this dragon, she's showing Dany what she can do and how powerful it is, like projecting her. Look, you need to do this to win. Exult in it. Yes, that's the good feeling. You should have this good feeling when you win, and that's what you should be doing. So it really would fit if Quaithe sent that dream, even though we're not sure that she can. But I think we can be sure she can, because as we're going to talk about here briefly, The most likely candidate, in my mind and in a lot of people's minds throughout this fandom, is that the mechanism for Quaithe to appear like she does, to be there but not really be there, is glass candles. Well, a glass candle. She probably doesn't have multiples. You never know, I guess, but probably just has one. We don't know exactly what a glass candle can do, but it is absolutely described as being able to do that. Send visions to other people. So that fits, right? And if you can do that, then maybe you can send dreams, because that's also sort of hinted at by Marwin later. But we're not entirely sure about that. So it's a strong possibility. Let's leave it at that for now. The scene continues here, though, with Dany asking questions and getting a familiar response.
She is standing over me. Who's there? Dany peered into the darkness. She thought she could see a shadow, the faintest outline of a shape. What do you want of me?
Remember, to go north, you must journey south. To reach the west, you must go east. To go forward, you must go back. And to touch the light, you must pass beneath the shadow.
Quaithe? Dany sprung from the bed and threw open the door. Pale yellow lantern light flooded the cabin, and Eerie and Jiki sat up sleepily. Khaleesi? Murmured Jiki, rubbing her eyes. Viserion woke and opened his jaws, and a puff of flame brightened even the darkest corners. There was no sign of a woman in a red lacquer mask. Khaleesi, are you unwell? Asked Jiki. A dream. Dany shook her head. I dreamed a dream, no more. Go back to sleep. All of us. Go back to sleep. Yet, try as she might, sleep would not come again.
So Quaithe doesn't have a lot of time in this moment. She has only enough space to say a couple of sentences, and she repeats this cardinal direction thing, this quirky compass bit with the touch the light, you must pass beneath the shadow. So that is clearly very important to her. Of all the things she could have said there, she repeats that. If we're going to take this as the going back part is going to Vaes Dothrak, returning to Vaes Dothrak, it's fitting enough because it really does look like she's going to go back to Vaes Dothrak. To go north, you must journey south. I think that's not necessarily too hard to understand. In other words, to go north in Westeros, you must journey south. Dragonstone is in the south, the way we reckon it. So she goes to Westeros, does stuff in the south, goes north after that. That could fit. It may not exactly be what's said here, but it certainly fits. And as far as you must to reach the west, you must go east. That's trickier because, like, where east? She's already been as far east as she's going to go. Going back to Vaes Dothrak seems to already be covered in this next sentence, and it's not east of Qarth. It's pretty much straight south. Vaes Dothrak straight north of Qarth, really. So that's, I'm not so sure about that. But maybe to go east, to reach, she has to learn those things about the east, so she doesn't have to literally go there. It's still pretty tricky. But also, Dany is hardly even able to pay attention to all this. She's just like too thrown by Quaithe's presence to even listen. She's like, "What? How are you even here? How are you talking to me? What the hell?" And she doesn't tell her handmaids the truth. She's like, yeah, I was just dreaming. She doesn't want to frighten them. She's not sure what she saw, so she wouldn't even know how to describe what just happened. She's like, well, actually, remember that lady with the mask back in Qarth? She was just here, in the room with us. And then y'all woke up and she was gone. Never mind. What's she going to say there? So I was talking about this section we entitled Dreams in the Belly of Balerion, but as we said, they weren't really dreams. And Quaithe is going to elaborate on that here in a moment. Glass candles. Here's the second time Quaithe seems to appear while not actually being there. Quote,
"A bath will help soothe me." She padded barefoot through the grass to her terrace pool. The water felt cool on her skin, raising goosebumps. Little fish nibbled at her arms and legs. She closed her eyes and floated. A soft rustle made her open them again. She sat up with a soft splash. "Missandei?" she called. "Eerie? Jiki?"
"They sleep,"
came the answer. A woman stood under the persimmon tree, clad in a hooded robe that brushed the grass. Beneath the hood, her face seemed hard and shiny. She's wearing a mask, Dany knew, a wooden mask finished in dark red lacquer. "Quaithe? Am I dreaming?" She pinched her ear and winced at the pain. "I dreamt of you on Balerion when first we came to Astapor."
"You did not dream, then or now." So this is the straightforward reason why I keep saying she wasn't asleep. And the evidence is there besides just Quaithe's statement. She was laying in the pool, closed her eyes and floated. She wasn't actually asleep. She was just drowsing, like resting with her eyes closed. And once again, like the last time, a sound alerted her to Quaithe's presence. And not a speaking sound, a rustle. This time it's more explicit. The other time it was just something else. It's made to sound more mysterious and creepy. In this case, the second example or second instance, it's a little more clear what's happening, but still not sure. She's still like a little freaked out, not scared. Dany is very hard to scare, but she's like, what the hell? She's confused.
You know, it's funny because, I don't think it is at all the same mechanism in which Bloodraven and Bran used the werewood tree, but it's the same word. The same rustling in the leaves, that they hear to tell that. So it's just interesting to be the same, but it's not the same magic.
It definitely speaks to that magical overlap theory that seems to be a guiding overall principle of how George's world works. That if there's certain forms of magic that exist, other cultures and disciplines can probably tap into that same thing, doing it differently or putting a different name on it. For example, lots of different prophecy magic, right? There's tons of prophecy magic. In our necromancy episode, we talked about how there's various forms all over the world of animating the dead or resurrections or whatever. So here we go. This is another example. The rustling, as Ashaya said, is how the werewood tree sounds, or when they're speaking. That's the verb George chooses. It's rustling. Or adverb. Is that adverb? Yeah. Anyway, it's the same word he uses. So that's very distinct and notable. Good catch by Ashaya there. So we have a lot of evidence that these are not dreams. Not just Quaithe saying it, but the description of what's happening when each of these scenes plays out. So what I can kind of glean from this is Quaithe can't just get in Dany's head anytime she wants. There has to be like an opening, and that opening is when Dany's relaxing or half asleep, something like that. That's when the window's open for Quaithe to get in there and say something. And so she's kind of choosing her moments. Maybe she's like trying all day. She's like, I'm going to try again to get in Dany's head. All right, it doesn't work. Try again. All right, it still doesn't work. All right, oh, now it's working. So then she says what she needs to say. Again, Dany is very hard to scare. She's not really afraid here, but confused for sure and wondering what the hell's going on. Waking up to someone using sorcery in your bedroom when you were asleep is just not cool, man. But Dany has to ask some questions to make sure that it really is magic she's dealing with here. That takes a lot of convincing, right? You can't just go, oh, that must be magic. That takes a little more evidence, right? So here come those questions. Quote,
"What are you doing here? How did you get past my guards?"
"I came another way. Your guards never saw me."
"If I call out, they will kill you."
"They will swear to you that I am not here."
"Are you here?"
"No. Hear me, Daenerys Targaryen. The glass candles are burning. Soon comes the pale mare, and after her the others. Lowercase others, by the way, y'all. Oh, Kraken and Dark Flame. Lion and Griffin. The sun's son and the mummer's dragon. Trust none of them. Remember the undying. Beware the perfumed seneschal." We'll talk through who those individuals are later. Let's just focus on the scene, what Quaithe is doing here. And what this points to, which again, glass candle. It really points to glass candle. We don't really have another option as far as I know. If it's something else, it's an unknown sorcery that hasn't been described, which seems unlikely. George doesn't really operate like he gives us a little bit, right? She actually says, too, at the beginning of the second sentence or third sentence, she says, the glass candles are burning. Straight up says it. That's a pretty strong clue. And Xaro said the same thing. Xaro Zaondaxus says, the glass candles are burning in the house of Urathon Nightwalker that have not burned in 100 years. This might be a connection that Quaithe has in Qarth. Maybe she knows this Urathon Nightwalker guy. Maybe she has access to that glass candle. If she's using a glass candle, which again, I'm like 99% sure that's the answer here. Where is it? Is it in Qarth? Probably, because that's where she is. I doubt she fled back to Ashai after Dany got on those ships. She probably just stayed where she was. Maybe not, though. Maybe she went back to Ashai where she had access to a glass candle and is now able to talk to Dany because she touched her on the wrist and left the tracking device, magical tracking device. Glass candles are a Valyrian artifact, but the technology could have been created earlier than them. Like, Valyria could have recreated that technology. Like, the Great Empire of the Dawn or Yi Ti could have that technology as well. Just like we theorized that the Great Empire had dragons and knew all sorts of dragon lore way before the Valyrians, and even possibly that's where the Valyrians got some of it, was from the Great Empire. Now, in classic George R. Martin fashion, the biggest lesson, the most revealing notes we get on glass candles comes in the book that Dany isn't in, A Feast for Crows. It begins in the prologue. Quote,
Armin looked down his nose at lazy Leo. He had the perfect nose for it, long and thin and pointed. Archmaester Marwin believes in many curious things, he said, but he has no more proof of dragons than Molander, just more sailors' stories.
You're wrong,
said Leo.
There is a glass candle burning in the mage's chambers.
A hush fell over the torchlit terrace. Armin sighed and shook his head. Molander began to laugh. The Sphinx studied Leo with his big black eyes. Rune looked lost. Pate knew about the glass candles, though he had never seen one burn. They were the worst-kept secret of the Citadel. It was said that they had been brought to Old Town from Valyria 1,000 years before the Doom. He had heard there were 4. 1 was green, and 3 were black, and all were tall and twisted.
1,000 years before the Doom is what that said. We could take that as an estimate. It's probably not exactly. Whenever someone says 1,000 years, it's always like a give or take a century. But that puts it in the neighborhood of 1,500 years ago, long before, say, Valyrian steel came to Westeros in any notable quantity. Interesting to wonder why the glass candles were specifically sent to Old Town. Certainly of all the locations in Westeros, it makes perhaps the most sense, given this is pre-Targaryen Westeros. Someone in Valyria must have thought it worth communicating with the Citadel, or vice versa, or both, right? It can be both. But they sent more than one. They brought 4 of them. So there was more purpose than just having one way to talk. They wanted multiple ways. Maybe they even intended on setting up a network like that, putting one of them up in some other city, some other place where you could use it to talk back and forth. But that didn't happen. Maybe it did for a while, but then they were put away because the glass candles stopped working. So then they were just used differently. They're used by the maesters in that initiation ritual. They have to light it on their last day. Of course they don't, but Old Town is something of an opposite end of the world city from Ashai too. That's a notable geographic feature, at least of the world we're shown. Farthest west, Old Town city. Farthest east, Ashai.
You did it backwards with what's behind you.
Yeah,
think about behind you.
That's true. Ashai. Westeros, Old Town, over here. Yeah, there we go. Got it right that time. Now, here's an unusual mention by Maester Aemon about this relevant stuff. He's also struggling with lucidity and consciousness at the time. Quote,
"When he woke, he'd call for Sam, insisting that he had to tell him something. But, oft as not, he would have forgotten what he meant to say by the time that Sam arrived. Even when he did recall, his talk was all a jumble. He spoke of dreams and never named the dreamer, of a glass candle that could not be lit, and eggs that would not hatch. He said the Sphinx was the riddle, not the riddler, whatever that meant."
why is Aemon at this point, when he's really moved by what he's learned about the princess that was promised, how he wants to go to Dany, it energizes him? Why is he thinking about the glass candles that can't be lit? That's like an initiation ritual for the maesters. He would have tried that like 80 some years ago and probably hasn't seen a glass candle since because he's been at the wall. That's odd. Like almost everything that Sam is relaying to us about Aemon's mumblings and his state of mind here has to do with the conversation and doings from the prologue of A Feast for Crows. The dreams that never named the dreamer. Well, let's come back to that in a second. But the glass candle, eggs, Sphinx. The Sphinx was the riddle, not the riddler. The Sphinx Alaris, right? Sorella, that's what they call her. What does she have to do with this? On a very basic level, well, if Sorella has a purpose by being there to gain a maester chain, well, we don't know what that purpose is, but she's in deeper than that. Not only is Aemon dreaming of her for some reason, probably, which indicates a level of importance for her that we just can't ascertain at this time, she's connected to the glass candle directly because she is an associate of Marwin's. We'll see her in a moment here talking about that. But spoke of dreams but never named the dreamer. That's a very peculiar line. So that means Aemon's not speaking of his own dreams. If he's not naming the dreamer, that implies doesn't even apply. It says straight out that it's somebody else he's talking about. So whose dreams could they be? Maybe Dany's the dreamer? Something like that. I don't know. But it all seems to, a lot of it at least seems to relate to the prologue of A Feast for Crows, which is really interesting. Why is so much of his mind set on that? Is it possible that the glass candle is being used to get in his head and it's just because he's already delirious and old, it's coming out like this? Probably not if our theory is that there needs to be physical contact to set it up in the first place. But again, I can't have a super amount of confidence in that whole touch thing. He is a Targaryen. So we actually get to see the glass candle in the... It's very fitting. We hear about the glass candle in the prologue, and then in the last chapter, we see it. Quote,
"The candle was unpleasantly bright. There was something queer about it. The flame did not flicker, even when Archmaester Marwin closed the door so hard that papers blew off a nearby table. The light did something strange to colors, too. Whites were bright as fresh fallen snow, yellow shone like gold, reds turned to flame, but the shadows were so black they looked like holes in the world." Sam found himself staring. The candle itself was 3 feet tall and slender as a sword, ridged and twisted, glittering black.
Now keep in mind, this is a large room. It's described as big, yet Sam realizes that besides a little hearth fire with a kettle on top of it, it's the only source of light in the whole room, so it's pretty darn bright. Now, half of this is a description of people who just aren't used to electric light. Like, this is, like, of course, like when I slam the door, the lights in here don't flicker either. That's not magic, but that's just something completely alien to these folk who live in a world without electricity. And just think about how huge that is, though. Think about someone you know who's 6 feet tall, and think of half of that. That's how tall this candle is. It's really, really big. And the way it changes the color of things, that is creepy. Well done, George. The shadows were so black, they looked like holes in the world. Whoa, great sentence. It's like an optical black hole. It draws your gaze and you can't stop staring at it. And that's kind of what we're seeing here. Like everyone in the room except Marwin, it can't seem to draw their eyes away from it. And here's another take. Marwin describing its capabilities. Quote,
all Valyrian sorcery was rooted in blood or fire. The sorcerers of the Freehold could see across mountains, seas, and deserts with one of these glass candles. They could enter a man's dreams and give him visions and speak to one another half a world apart, seated before their candles. Do you think that might be useful, Slayer?
He says yes. Basically, he's like, yeah, we wouldn't need messenger ravens anymore. And not long after, Alleras reveals to Sam that, hey, you know how I came to find you in the novices' hall? That wasn't an accident. Marwin saw you using the glass candle, and that's how I knew you'd be there. So I went to pick you up. So this, again, shows Alleras and Marwin are working together. Obviously, Marwin's the one in charge here. And remember, Alleras gives Leo a look when Leo points out the glass candle is burning. Alleras knew that too, as we can see here. And Leo is in the room for this, is watching the candle as well. He's also just kind of staring at it. So Alleras is like, why'd you tell? When Leo pointed that out. Because Alleras didn't reveal it. She could have said so, but didn't. So it was kind of like, yeah, maybe you shouldn't have said that, But I don't know, but maybe not. Maybe that's not what the look meant, but it's noteworthy. But the implications of Marwin knowing how to use the glass candle is very serious. You can't see future events, though. That's not listed as a power of the glass candle. We just heard a list of what it can do, and it doesn't say that. So what did he see? Did he know what to look for? Or was he just looking into the glass candle saying, hey, what's going to be on like a TV? Like, what am I going to see today? And he saw a brother of the Night's Watch arriving at Old Town and was like, oh, let's go talk to him. How did he know Sam was important? How did he know Sam was someone that he needed to go send Alleras to grab? Was it because he saw him traveling with Maester Aemon? Was it something else? What? That's really interesting. Like, he picked Sam out using the glass candle. How? Just no idea. It's peculiar, though, right? This line, they could enter a man's dreams and give him visions, very plainly stated and very plainly fits with what Quaithe has been doing. Other than, with the two-finger touching thing, that maybe that's needed to set it up. But definitely this is a description of what they can do, and that's definitely what she's doing. The whole idea of people having glass candles that can speak to each other a world apart, like a telephone or a video call, will that come into play? If so, this particular glass candle at the Citadel, there's obviously 3 more. There's 3 black ones, 1 green one. This one at least is accessible to these people who are in this scene. Maybe it will be used to talk to some other glass candle somewhere, including maybe the one that Quaithe is using, right? So we've compared the glass candle a little bit to Greenseer powers and a little bit of Quaithe. What Quaithe is doing is comparable to Bloodraven and Bran's relationship. But again, it can't see the future. That's a big difference. Greenseers can see the future. Quaithe maybe can see the future, but not with the glass candle. She's got some other means to see the future. Maybe. Actually, if you put everything we've said about Quaithe, everything she's said, we should not assume or even conclude that she can see the future. What we can extrapolate is that she knows the prophecy, has confidence in it, and thus can check off boxes. She can see what's happening and say, oh, Dany is fulfilling the terms of the prophecy here. She is checking off the boxes of Azor Ahai. Thus, she must be Azor Ahai. That doesn't mean she can see the future. That doesn't mean she can see Dany coming. She doesn't know what Dany's going to do. It certainly doesn't when she's giving warnings about the faithlessness of men and how untrustworthy they are. That's got nothing to do with prophecy. That's just common sense. That's just learned wisdom. about the world. So, and there's more evidence that Quaithe can't see the future anyway. Like, for example, in the line that she delivers to Dany about the glass candles are burning, and she says that the sun's son and the mummer's dragon are coming. The lion and griffin are coming. Well, Aegon is probably the mummer's dragon in that, and the griffin is definitely Jon Connington. She tells Dany they're coming, but they don't. They change their mind. They change their plans and head west instead of east. That doesn't sound like someone who can see the future. That sounds like someone who saw what was currently happening, reported on it, and then it changed. So that's a pretty big point that I cannot be sure, and given the evidence, it's very supported. We cannot assume Quaithe can see the future at all. We can only assume that she understands the prophecies that refer to the future, but only that. She's not actually seeing it. She just knows what the prophecy says is going to happen, and she's just going from that. So keep that in mind. Very important there. Very distinct thing about her that I think a lot of people have maybe assumed too much about. Now let's talk about the other person in the room here, and I don't mean Leo Tyrell, though he's a little bit interesting too. It's Pate, the replacement Pate, Jaqen H'ghar Pate. He's in the room for all of this. That's huge. Okay, so many of us have theorized that the reason Jaqen is in the Citadel is, and the reason he stole a key, and the key is important, he stole a key that might give him access to different rooms all around the Citadel. And there's a book that we know is locked up that Tyrion thinks about called The Death of Dragons. And supposedly it talks about the vulnerabilities of dragons, how dragons can die, which you can imagine why the Faceless Men might want that book. However, we shouldn't assume that because that book is a strong candidate, that it's the only candidate, or that we're even right about that. Now, one of the reasons I think we probably are right about that is because of the key. If Pate's goal was something to do with this glass candle, he didn't need the key. The key isn't needed here. Marwin's just like, yeah, come on in and hang out in my room. Look at the glass candle if you want. There's no one's keeping it from them. So I don't know if they need that. So that's a little interesting. Now, it's easy to miss when Sam arrives at the Citadel. He tells his story to Alaric. He's like, it just all comes out. He's like, yeah, the others, the dead horses, the dragon glass dagger. I killed another. The ship down here with Aemon talking about the prince that was promised. In the scene with Marwin, when he's in the room, it just says he repeats that story. It's like one sentence. So it's very easy to miss that he repeats that story with Pate in the room. Pate hears the flat-out declaration that Daenerys Targaryen is Azor Ahai. He flat-out hears that the others exist. He flat-out hears that Sam killed one with dragonglass. He hears all this. We cannot assume the Faceless Men knew any of this. They might have known some of it. Like, there's a lot of stuff here, and they've got to know some of it. But all of it? No way. What an earful this guy just got. And no one cares because it's like, well, that's just Pate. He's sitting in the room. It's just this person that everyone forgets about, including a lot of readers. It's easy to miss he's in that scene because he's just standing there staring at the glass candle until the last few paragraphs where he offers Sam a place to sleep. Or actually, the first thing he says is, Sam goes, "Is that?" And then Pate interrupts and says, "Obsidian." And this is one of the big tells, by the way, that he's not Pate anymore, that he's a Faceless Man. Because in the prologue, when all the others are talking about dragonglass, they're talking about the glass candle and what it's made of, he interjects. He says, "Dragonglass. The small folk call it dragonglass." And he thinks, that seemed important somehow. It's like, that's my contribution to the conversation. But in this final chapter, when Sam goes, "Is that?" Pate interjects obsidian, not dragonglass. He says obsidian. So he says an entirely different thing. And then Marwin interjects Pate and says, "Call it dragonglass." So it's like the reverse of what happened in the prologue. Instead of Pate saying, "Call it dragonglass," it's Marwin, which is a big tell that these are not the same person anymore. Bringing it back to Quaithe, This is something Dany might need to be warned about. The fact that a faceless man just heard all this stuff about her, and the faceless men don't exactly like dragons or presumably the mother of dragons, right? Especially if there's some prophesied person that might do things that the faceless men don't like. I mean, they're a whole different religion. You know, they don't know. You can't trust those guys when it comes to dragon lords and dragon queens, etc. And Marwin himself, right, he says that you can't trust prophecy. You know, he knows about the prophecy, but you can't take it literally. If you do take it literally, you're bound to doom yourself. So Quaithe can be wrong too. If all this is based on prophecy that Quaithe is very confident in, and Marwin here is saying, well, don't be too confident in prophecy, well, then maybe Quaithe isn't quite on track here. She could be a little wrong. She could be off. And that, in some ways, would be pretty fitting for George to give this, like, spirit guide of sorts to Dany, who is not quite right. Not misleading her necessarily, just wrong, right? Prophecy roster, or prophecy roll call, which speaks to, in this case, the people named in Quaithe's vision. The Pale Mare, that's what she says, right? Listen, Daenerys Targaryen, the glass candles are burning, the Pale Mare will come, and then blah, blah, blah. So, credibility, she called it the Pale Mare came. The same word was used. It was a man arriving on a pale mare, and he was carrying the plague, carrying the bloody flux or whatever it was. And then Kraken and Dark Flame, that's pretty straightforward. Kraken is Victarion. He's literally on his way to Dany. Makoro, Dark Flame, I mean, he's a super dark-skinned man, and he's a R'hllorist priest. Flame, Dark, and he's with Victarion, and they're named together. Kraken and Dark Flame. Very straightforward. Lion and Griffin, Tyrion and Jon Connington, also very straightforward. And at the time she delivers that line, they are both headed to her. Obviously that changes. Jon Connington no longer on his way to her, but Tyrion still is. The Sun's son and the Mummer's dragon. This is easy too. The Sun's son is Quentyn Martell. The son of Dorne, the Sun's son. Yeah, he's easy. Aegon Young Griff, the Mummer's dragon. The cloth dragon on poles. That's Varys. The Mummer is Varys. This is his dragon. He is the one propping up young Griff. Very straightforward. These are both princes in this one. One turns into a frog and then gets roasted. The other we'll see. We don't know what's going to happen to young Griff. He may also get roasted, though. It may be a similar outcome, a similar endgame for him. The perfumed seneschal, that's almost certainly Varys. Varys is the perfumed guy. He is roughly a seneschal. Certainly that role, it's an Eastern term, seneschal, but it applies to Varys' role. It's close enough. Dany thinks it must be Resnack. She's like, Resnack? And Quaithe can't say, no, not him. Because if she's seeing these things symbolically in visions or imagery, she doesn't know the person's name. She can see Varys, but she doesn't know what his name is. She's like, bald guy? That's who I'm talking about. You know, like, both of them wear perfume, right? Now, some people think it's the ship, the Celisori Coran, because Makoro tells Tyrion that the translation of Celisori Coran is Stinky Steward, which is very similar to perfumed seneschal. But this is probably a red herring. And we know George does red herrings. There's red herrings about Jon Snow's birth, about Ned Stark's pathway to home, and all other things too. He doesn't do a lot of red herrings, but he definitely does them. So in this case, it's so on the nose. Smell, stinky perfume on the nose. But this would be repetitive, right? It would be repetitive to have that. Stinky steward. And she already knows, right? She already knows that Tyrion and Dark Flame are coming to her. And that's who's on the Celisori Coran. It's Tyrion and Makoro. Well, and Jorah, but he's not named here. So why would the prophecy repeat them? It's like Kraken and Dark Flame. Also, the ship carrying them. Who cares about the ship? Also, it doesn't actually get there. It sinks. Or it gets becalmed and then the slavers come. So same thing. It's just floating aimlessly out there. And by then, Makoro has already slept off the off the ship during the storm. So he wasn't even on the ship when that happened. So that doesn't even work, right? So that's kind of a good reason to call that a red herring. She says at the end, trust none of them. Remember the Undying. Now, what I think that means is, well, the Undying were someone she immediately said, don't trust them. And I was right, wasn't I? You trusted the Undying, you went there, and they tried to kill you. They tried to steal your life force. Think of that whenever you think of people wanting things from you. They're all going to be something like that. They won't all be supernatural. And they're not all going to try to drain your life force or whatever that was. But don't trust anyone because they all want things from you. And it's fair. Like, look at that list. Not all of the above are malevolent. None of them are particularly concerned with Dany's well-being either. They all want things from her too, even the ones who are decent folk, or at least not bad guys. Quentyn, he's dead, but he was seeking vengeance, justice, fire, and blood on behalf of his family, as his father tells Arianne, right? That's about what they want. It's not about what Dany wants. It's not about saving the world. Tyrion, same thing. One of his prime motivations is getting back at all the people that screwed him, especially his own family. So it's also revenge and of a different sort. He's not about saving the world either. To be fair, he doesn't know that the world needs saving. Maybe with evidence, Tyrion will change his tune. But for now, nope. Moqorro is perhaps the most interesting inclusion here because he believes Dany is Azor Ahai come again. So he's not an enemy to her. In fact, he's explicitly on her side. She's the prophet of his religion. You would think, is a sincere ally, but Quaithe included him for some reason. So maybe it's again this whole point about Moqorro, Benero, all these red priests. They see her as a vehicle to saving the world, not as an individual, not as someone they really care about. So they are neutral to her as a human. They just need her for what she is, for her qualities, for her characteristics, not for her person. Something I've pointed out many times is that it's peculiar as well. Who's not on that list? Right? Marwin leaves for her, gets on a ship. This moment he discovers what Sam is saying. So he goes to her, or is heading to her, yet Quaithe doesn't name him. That isn't so confusing, though. It's not like, oh my God, Marwin wasn't mentioned. Because again, if you eliminate the possibility that Quaithe was seeing into the future, which I think we should at least consider, then she couldn't have named Marwin when she told Dany that because he wasn't on his way yet. He was still just chilling at the Citadel. She could only see who was actively heading towards her, and at the time, he wasn't. All those people were when she named them. All of them were, right? They all were going for Dany. Victarion, absolutely going for Dany. Quentyn, going for Dany. Tyrion, trying to get to Dany, thanks to, Illyrio. Moqorro, obviously, same thing. Yeah, so all of them just going for Dany. So there's a lot of evidence there that shows that she can't see what's coming, only what's happening at the current moment. She also doesn't mention the other maester, because Marwin says the Citadel's going to send a maester to Dany. I need to get there first. So that one's not mentioned either, which again, she couldn't have seen that. Hadn't happened yet. Fits. Now, interestingly, Moqorro and Victarion and Tyrion are now at Slaver's Bay, but Dany isn't. So when she presumably returns, she will learn as well, presumably, that Quaithe was right. She'll be like, Moqorro, oh, is that Dark Flame? Victarion, that's Kraken, that's easy. Tyrion, Lion, that's also easy. And she's already gotten the proof of Sun and Pale Mare. She doesn't know Quentyn burned to death, but that's not relevant to Quaithe being right that he was headed towards her. She hasn't necessarily figured out what Sun meant, but she might, especially if she starts thinking along these lines with these easier clues to bring her into it. Tyrion, Victarion. So Dany has good reason to believe Quaithe. She's proving herself, and it's not like, listen to me now, trust me now, I'm your servant now. It was gradual. It's winning trust over time, which is kind of the right way to do it. Like, if you're trying to win trust quickly, then you're not doing it right. People shouldn't trust you quickly on matters of great importance. If someone's like, I'm giving you $5 to hand me my food, well, I trust that. I'm not worried about it. But, I'm not going to hand someone $5 to invest who I don't know to expect. I'm not expecting that $5 back if I don't know this person, right? But if I get to know them and I learn about them, they say, okay, I can trust you with my money. Very similar thing here. Dany didn't trust Quaithe at first, for good reason. But here, as time passes and more of Quaithe's predictions come true, and Quaithe still seems to have no ulterior motive, Dany's just going to have more and more reason to believe and trust and be like, this person's been consistent for quite a while. They have yet to ask me for anything. It's getting harder and harder to ignore what they're saying, especially with more and more of their prediction coming true. And this is a great parallel because Stannis says the same thing about Melisandre. I think I said it earlier. Stannis doesn't necessarily believe in R'hllor, but Melisandre clearly has power. Melisandre's exaggerating her powers, which that's a part of Stannis' flaw here, is that, yeah, she knows that about you. She knows that you will respond to actual power, and so she will exaggerate her powers. That said, she does have real power and a lot of it, so that's just the interesting thing about Melisandre, is that she just exaggerates what she's already capable of. Why so cryptic? Let's talk about why she's not direct. Why not just say these things? Why not be more explicit? Why be so confusing? Let's use an example here. When Quaithe says, "Fear the perfumed seneschal," Dany responds,
Reznak? Why should I fear him? Dany rose from the pool. Water trickled down her legs, and goose flesh covered her arms in the cool night air. If you have some warning for me, speak plainly. What do you want of me, Quaithe? Moonlight shone in the woman's eyes.
To show you the way.
I remember the way. I go north to go south, east to go west, back to go forward. And to touch the light, I have to pass beneath the shadow. She squeezed the water from her silvery hair. I am half sick of riddling. In Qarth I was a beggar, but here I am a queen. I command you.
And then she's interrupted. If Quaithe's purpose is to save the world, yeah. Why be mysterious? It's so important. If you're telling me we're all going to die unless we act, then get on with it. Now, she's not actually telling Dany we're all going to die unless you act. But she's still not being specific. She's still not giving details. It feels counterproductive to that end goal on some level. On one hand, it's certainly a literary device. Having Dany puzzle over it and be frustrated by it, it echoes our own concept of it, our own maybe frustrations about it. Nina says that. She says, we're as curious as she is. Her frustration echoes ours. And you can see she is frustrated here. Dany's like, I'm half sick of riddling. Just come tell me, give me the straight dope. But Dany is a wonderful mix of relatable to extremely unrelatable. This part's very relatable. Quaithe isn't being straight with her. She's not coming out and giving her regular answer. She's cryptic, and we're like, can you please be more specific? Can you please be more clear? When Dany is, a prophesied savior birthing dragons, that's not very relatable. But I love that about her, that she's still very human. She still has these relatable moments, even though she's godlike. And the other thing, and I've kind of alluded to this throughout, is it keeps her thinking about it. Quaithe is on her mind a lot because it's a curiosity, because it's a mystery. If she just had these straightforward answers, she wouldn't necessarily think about it. And she might just dismiss it because it sounds so crazy and over the top and supernatural, and might get her to think Quaithe is trying to steer me to something that's not good for me, or steering me towards something that's good for her, something that she wants. But consistently, Quaithe doesn't do that. So, if at the end of all this, Quaithe knows Dany will die or is likely to die, well, that's a hard subject to broach, isn't it? She's like, yeah, you got to do all these things to save the world, which I haven't told you about yet. But when I do, or when you learn that, I'm also going to have to tell you, or you're also going to learn, that at the end of it, you're going to die. So that is a good reason to break it in slowly, not to gradually bring her up to this tragic conclusion, if that's where it's headed. I do think that's where the story is headed. I don't know that that's what Quaithe is going to say. But if Quaithe just comes out and says, well, the others are coming, the blah, 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 how's Dany going to believe that? It's just too much. So there are a lot of reasons for Quaithe to be cryptic. And if you answer directly, about other things, like you can't be obscure. Like you can't be both, right? She has to be consistent. Also, if Quaithe is seeing visions herself, well, these visions aren't going to be 100% accurate. They're not going to be something she can completely deconstruct. In fact, there's an argument that she's not doing that at all. That's why it's cryptic, because she's giving it to Dany raw. She's saying, well, this is what I saw. So I'm just telling you exactly what I perceived in my visions.
More support for Quaithe Daenerys.
Quaithe Daenerys raw. Quanny, is that the ship name for them?
I think it's Quaithe.
Quaithe. So if Quaithe is seeing visions or something like that, which, I'm a little down on that, but we got to be open to the possibility. Then she's not being able to, she can't see precise things. She's just seeing visions. Just like Melisandre. We see in Melisandre's point of view. She sees Bloodraven and Bran. She sees them as like a wolf face and a wooden demon or whatever, a tree demon. That's the kind of things that appear in these visions. Like they're not literal. So not only should I repeat the point that Quaithe could just be wrong, but she might be cryptic because she's reporting them as they come to her in her mind. It's like, well, this is what I saw. I saw, the Kraken and a dark flame, and I didn't know what it means, but I know they're coming to you. You might know who those people are. I just know what I saw in my vision. So I'm just telling you what I saw, and hopefully it's useful to you. And that's why, again, to repeat, when Dany's like, Resnick? Quaithe is like, I don't know. I don't know what the person's name is. I just know Perfume Seneschal. That's what my vision or the glass candle or both told me. I don't have a name. I saw somebody, And if she does know, what a jerk move. She's like, I know the names, but I'm not going to tell you. I'm going to give you riddles instead. That's unlikely. As much as she's being cryptic, she's got to be cryptic for a reason. And that reason isn't to make it harder on Dany. Like, it's not that. Now, here's how the scene ends. This is when, remember, Dany got interrupted here. And this is the interruption. Quote, Daenerys, remember the Undying. Remember who you are.
The blood of the dragon. But my dragons are roaring in the darkness. I remember the Undying. Child of 3, they called me. 3 mounts they promised me, 3 fires and 3 treasons. 1 for blood and 1 for gold and 1 for... Your Grace! Missandei stood in the door of the Queen's bedchamber, a lantern in her hand. Who are you talking to? Dany glanced back toward the persimmon tree. There was no woman there, no hooded robe, no lacquer mask, no Quaithe.
Where she is now, well, this is obviously confusing to Dany, and she wonders if Quaithe is referring to the prophecies of the House of the Undying or just the lesson of what the Undying were doing, which is tempting her with power, and then actually it was all a trick to try and steal her power. So she doesn't know whether that's what she's talking about. Well, the Undying vision, there's a lot of things in there. All those 3s, those were prophecies. That I should pay attention to that, right? But is that what Quaithe is talking about? Or is it the more mundane lesson of you shouldn't be trusting any people of power who want things from you? I guess it could be both, which could be a fitting way for a cryptic message to be delivered. Dany could think about all that. But it also turns a little dark when Dany starts to think, am I going mad? Like, why do I keep seeing Quaithe? Like, this runs in my family. Madness runs in my family, and now I'm like seeing somebody. Is it really? It's difficult introspection on her part, but she does it. Still, though, I mean, I think it's sorcery. Y'all mostly think it's sorcery, probably, but it's very interesting to put ourselves in Dany's place and think it's troubling for her for a lot of reasons because it isn't so simple. She doesn't understand what Quaithe is talking about. She again doesn't know about the Long Night, so she doesn't have context for a lot of what these things even mean. 3 fires, 3 treasons. Yeah. Like, is that what you're talking about? Is that something I should be considering separately? Yeah, it's tricky. Now, another idea I like is that Dany has repressed memories. Remember, like the lemon tree, the house with the red door, there's something going on there that's a little weird, a little off. Dany has some false memories there, or maybe it's a bigger story than that. There may be other things Dany has forgotten, or maybe that is really relevant. And Quaithe may be trying to jog Dany's memory, to get her to remember these things rather than just telling her. The problem with that is, well, how would Quaithe know any of these things? We've stripped down a lot of what Quaithe's powers are to glass candle and shadowbinding, which is shadowbinding probably isn't that relevant to talking to Dany from afar. And if she's just operating on what she already knows about the prophecy rather than seeing current visions, then this wouldn't be feasible. But if Dany lost things to trauma and youth and or just whatever other factors, and Quaithe knows about that through supernatural means or otherwise, well, that's really convincing. If Dany remembers these things within herself, that's a lot more certain to her than someone telling her, right? Delirium on the Dothraki Sea. After she flies away with Drogon from Daznak's pit, she spends some time living with Drogon on his new Dragonstone, his Dragonstone of the Dothraki Sea. But she knows she can't stay. She's, food is a problem, and, she's not exactly going to accomplish her goal, lost on the steppes. So, but she's getting weak and hungry and getting lightheaded, which opens her mind up for Quaithe to get in there, right? From what we said about sleepy, drowsy, this is the opening. She lays down. Quote.
Off in the distance, a wolf howled. The sound made her feel sad and lonely, but no less hungry. As the moon rose above the grasslands, Dany slipped at last into a restless sleep. She dreamed. All her cares fell away from her, and all her pains as well, and she seemed to float upward into the sky. She was flying once again, spinning, laughing, dancing, as the stars wheeled around her and whispered secrets in her ear. To go north, you must journey south. To reach the west, you must go east. To go forward, you must go back. To touch the light, you must pass beneath the shadow. Quaithe? Dany called. Where are you, Quaithe? Then she saw. Her mask is made of starlight.
Remember who you are, Daenerys.
The stars whispered in a woman's voice.
The dragons know. Do you? Now, the trick with this one is whether it's another appearance by Quaithe or part of her delirium. Because
I debated whether to give you the line.
Oh, yeah, right? Yeah, because if it's like...
First,
yeah, that's a good point. Because she also talks to Viserys, the Grass, and Ser Jorah consecutively. I don't know if it's in that order, but it doesn't matter. So, did she talk to a Quaithe apparition that Quaithe sent from the glass candles? And then these were deliriums? The other three of Viserys and the Grass and Ser Jorah? Probably not. So this might not be an appearance by Quaithe, but it might be. So she becomes extremely weak after all this. Then Khal Jocko and 50 riders appear, which is the end of the book. Not what happens next, or not sure what happens next, but it sure does seem like this is a to go forward, to go back, you must go back type of moment, where she's going to go back to dealing with the Dothraki, back to the base Dothrak, and then probably recruiting them, as she is the stallion who mounts the world. She has the ultimate mount, after all, and Drogon will probably be very crucial to all this, just like he was crucial at the House of the Undying. And at this moment, her other two dragons are locked up. Well, actually, they're not. They get out. But she doesn't know that. She thinks they're still locked up. They are released in one of the Barristan chapters. And she is told here at the end, the dragons know what you are. Do you? The dragons know they're dragons. That's simple. They're beasts. Yes, they're supernatural, but they're not like super intelligent. They're not all that conscious. They're not, they're not like smarter than dogs or something like that. Or if they are, it's only by a little. So this isn't some self-identity thing. It's like, no, they're dragons. They know they're dragons. You need to do that too. Be a dragon. As again, this is this very consistent message alongside the less understandable but still consistent to go forward, you must go back. All that business. She keeps saying that. And Dany keeps hearing it, whether Quaithe is telling her in this moment or whether she's just remembering it herself. It clearly matters, and it keeps getting repeated by George. So we're not meant to forget it. We're meant to keep thinking about it. Even if we don't get it, even if we can't answer it, we're supposed to be thinking about it. We're supposed to keep it in mind for whenever a resolution does come. When people say, that's what he meant. That's what the prophecy meant. That's what to go forward, all that meant. To touch the light, you must pass beneath the shadow. Eventually, it might become just like that's what it was. Right now, though, we definitely don't have that. One line from her slew of visions at the House of the Undying is, beneath the mother of mountains, a line of naked crones crept from a great lake and knelt shivering before her, their gray heads bowed. That, to me, is hardcore proof that Dany is going back there. This already looked like, this whole scene makes it look like that, but this shows that it was set up books before. Back in book 2, it was already set up for Dany to go back to the Dothraki. The woman behind the mask. So it isn't just her words that are cryptic, it's her entire identity. Now again, yeah, masks are really common in her culture. Shadowlanders wear masks. And Melisandre is wearing a mask too. A mask of light, so to speak, a glamour. In some ways, her identity doesn't much matter. Like we said, she is the embodiment of prophecy. She's guiding Dany. She's telling some important things. She's encouraging her. She's reminding her. But would it really seem right? Would it be satisfying if such an important being, such an important mentor or guiding figure is never explained? We have to learn more about Quaithe, or at least where she came from or why, because it would just be so unsatisfying if Dany had this important guiding figure that just is never explained. Or just big help Dany got from Quaithe, but why she's there, why she helped, how she knew to help, none of that's explained. I really doubt that. So I've been very confident that even though Quaithe, her identity might not be that important, I don't think it can be left just that simply. We have to at least get a little more. If it's not telling us who she is, it has to be telling us who she's a part of or why. There has to be more of some kind. Just like Bran isn't going to learn all the secrets of the children of the forest, but he is face to face with what they are without any mask. He's in the cave with all the skulls and the trees growing out of eyes and the growing into the everything, all that creepiness. It's not hidden from him anymore. And maybe that sort of thing is coming for Dany, where she has to be confronted by these dark truths and what her purpose really is, and how it's not about the throne. It's about the others. It's about these other things, right? So back to Melisandre being our best parallel. She's a little better of a parallel than Bloodraven to Bran, because Melisandre Stannis is already an echo of Dany, and X in this case is Quaithe. Melisandre thinks Stannis is Azor Ahai. Her methods are different than Quaithe's, more hands-on, more direct. Quaithe is far away, sending Dany messages. Melisandre's on the front lines, but she's got the wrong savior. Whether Quaithe is doing it right or not, she's at least got the right person. She at least has the right individual. There's some theories out there about who Quaithe is, if there is going to be a reveal, who that might be. One of them is that she is related to Melisandre, because they have so much in common. Maybe they're connected in some other way. They both come from the east. They're both associated with Ashai. They're both associated with Shadowbinding. It's kind of a stretch, though. There's not a lot to go on there. Those are things they have in common, but it isn't a whole lot. None of that's very specific connective tissue. It's just kind of there. The most popular theory, I think, is that she's Shiera Seastar. The mask of starlight in this last scene, this last vision or delirium that Dany's having is mentioned. And she's, I see, her mask is made of starlight. As if that's an answer. It's not. but if we're to see it as an answer, that might be the answer. But I don't agree. I don't see how it could be Shiera Seastar. I really don't. Because Bloodraven indicates she's dead. He speaks to Daemon and Bittersteel and Shiera in the past tense. A woman I loved. He could be saying I don't love her anymore, but I doubt that. He was so besotted. And either way, it sounds like, and that's not the only reason. It sounds like he's referring to her as past tense. Also, there isn't much to go on either. Like, the eyes, wouldn't we notice, wet and shiny, that one's green and one's blue? Yeah, I don't think so. Shiera's eyes are extremely distinct, and that's the only feature we get of this person, and they don't match. That just doesn't work for me. Another theory is Alyssa Farman. With her Sun Chaser, there is certainly evidence she made it as far as Eshai, which maybe makes her a candidate, but that's kind of weak too, at least on the surface. But Alt-Shift-X, our good friend, did a video on it, so check that out if you're interested in going deeper into that rabbit hole. For some of the same reasons, some of the same logic that I think we have to learn more about Quaithe, we can't be done with her. She's got to appear to Dany again, maybe multiple times. I don't think that's the end yet. She hasn't done the things she wants Dany to do, so she's got to keep encouraging that. She's got to keep pushing her towards that, whatever it is. I don't think we'll necessarily see her in physical form again, though. I think we might just only in these visions, only through these glass candles, and maybe some of that will be explained. Dany may learn. It's like, oh, glass candle, I get it now. You know? Speaking of the glass candles, a little more on that. If Pate knows how to use the glass candle, how creepy is that? He can just tell the faceless men back home all these things he learned. So that's a big part of this, is Quaithe and her association with glass candles. Those things are related plot-wise. The reveals on any of them may be connected to each other. As Quaithe pushes Dany to be more like a dragon, that makes her more destructive, more of an instrument of destruction, more dangerous, less attractive to Westerosi who are living now, because if she's an agent of change, destroy everything so it can be reborn in a new world. Well, the current people living may not like that idea. And how will Dany actually interpret that? She keeps telling her to be a dragon. What does that mean to Dany? Probably means devastate, destroy, and conquer. Use the means at your disposal, which is blasts of fire and tooth and claw. That's what you have at your disposal. Be that. It's in your blood, literally. But if that's what Quaithe means, it's kind of similar to the way Olenna Tyrell said it on the TV show. Maybe similar vibes here. It still comes down to how Dany interprets that. What does she mean? What does she think that means? Does it mean burn King's Landing? Does it mean dominate the other lords? Don't take no from an answer. Make them all fall in line and burn the ones that don't until they're all, beholden to you, till they all cede to your authority. Maybe it's not so straightforward. Maybe Quaithe will become less cryptic as Dany's eyes are more open to what's really happening. Again, for the 50th time, Dany doesn't know about the Long Night. Once she learns about that, when she learns about the others and gets over the initial whoa of that, then you can start telling her more. Once she accepts that, you can give her more details. You can tell her more about what's needed. Say, oh, look, yeah, they're beings of ice. You got the fire. You have the best solution to this. You dreamt of it too. And maybe Quaithe sent her that dream, as we talked about at the time. So as she learns these things, as she becomes more aware of them, it might be appropriate to give her more information. Quaithe, Melisandre might get into the mix by that point. But again, the dark side of all this is Quaithe pushing Dany towards a goal that will see her own life end. Dany's life, right? I don't think Quaithe is at risk here. That's where I land on all this. I think that's like, if we're making a conclusion here, I think that's likely that, yeah, that's part of the reason Quaithe is cryptic. It's because this isn't going to be this new world that Dany's paving the way for. Dany herself won't be a part of it. She'll have died in the process of making it. And that's a dark truth that if Dany learns that too soon, it might steer her away from the goal and at all. She's like, I'm not doing that. It's going to lead to my death. Especially if she doesn't grasp how important her death is. Like if Dany can sincerely take to heart that her death would save the world, All right, then. That might get her to do it. But if the first thing she learns is death, I'm going to die, and then she learns that her death will have a good purpose, well, she may have already set herself against that notion. Well, I'm not going to go down that path. So she has to be given the information in the right order, or it could throw her off. So that is another perhaps reason that Quaithe is so cryptic. And again, but I do again think we will learn more about her, and I think we have to learn more about her for the story to fit, for it to be satisfying in that regard. We have to know something about this guiding light that's telling Dany so many important things. It can't just be left untold, unexplained. But that's my take. How about you? Poll results. If Quaithe's mask was removed, Dany wouldn't know her, but we would. 60% of you think that's the case, that we would recognize Quaithe without her mask on, but Dany wouldn't. 31% of you think Dany wouldn't know her, nor would we. So none of us would know her if she took her mask off. 31%. And 7% was we would both know her. Dany and us readers, we would all recognize her. But only 7% of you think that. So the most popular by far is Dany wouldn't know her, but we would. And that is fitting with a lot of the existing theories. Like, yeah, we would know Shiera Seastar. We would know Alyssa Farman, but we wouldn't know. But Dany wouldn't. Trivia question. It was, the Citadel has 4 glass candles. What colors are they? Black, 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 and green. John Merkel got it. Good job, John Merkel. Anyone else listening, if you got that? Good job. Pat on the back for you. And that's apparently also George's colors for obsidian. George's obsidian is not the same as real world obsidian. Most of it's black, but occasionally it's green, or I think purple maybe can be a color too. Yeah. Right? Okay. So, but the Citadel doesn't have one of those cool purple ones. Only the Valyrians got those. Maybe there's one in Qarth.
Quaithe has a purple one.
Maybe. Yeah. If Dany sees like purple light glowing on her face, and he's like, "Hey, purple light, where's that coming from?" So some episodes that are relevant to this one you might want to check out to stay immersed. The Great Empire of the Dawn episode, the Ashai by the Shadow episode, the Shadow by Ashai episode, which is by far the most recent of the 3. The Melisandre episode, also fairly recent. Our episode on the Red Comet, quite a while ago, but still very relevant. And our episode on Septon Barth, also quite a while ago, but still very relevant. Thanks again to Nina for her great notes on this episode and so many of our other episodes, nearly all of them in the many years since we've been doing this. Thanks to Joey Townsend for the theme music, and thanks to Michael Klarfeld for the video intro and the maps you see behind me. You can get his posters, his maps, at his website, which you can find the link in the description.
We're going to go take one of his maps to Seattle to get signed. One of the big cloth maps. We're going to bring our Reach map that has George on it as Garth Greenhand. And so, yeah.
It's fitting to have George as Garth Greenhand, the progenitor of everything in Westeros. All the people. He created them all. It's fitting. So, yeah, we're going to Seattle Worldcon. And we'll hopefully have some stories to tell after that. So stay tuned. And either way, we'll have more content, whether that or other stuff. Certainly to come. You know what to do in the meantime. Valar Reedus.